Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of What If Naruto accidentally goes to another world and learn magic. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
In a different universe, are you sure we should be doing this? They were standing in front of a huge apparatus that looked like a giant solarium with numerous crystal globes arranged in rings around them when a young man spoke to an elderly man dressed in mage's robes in the ruined tower. The old mage was still determined to study the device many centuries ago. A mage had conducted some kind of experiment here, but it was eventually abandoned because of certain circumstances. Why complain? We're here to see if this magical artifact can be worth something to the guild. The study of this device could prove to be the key to many things here for our world. But sir, wasn't that device outlawed when it was discovered to be highly unstable? That was long ago. Besides, magic has improved since then, and this device could go a very long way in making transportation of many things even more effective when time is of the essence and not to be wasted. The gadget, a dimensional portal, was made to transport items through a magical tunnel into a different location without requiring them to travel for days, weeks, months, or even years. However, the portal was not used for a long time because the mage chose to close it down after many fought to control it. How can we even get it to work? With this crystal would prove to be the key for it all. It has more than enough energy to do its work. After revealing a huge crystal that glowed with immense power, the mage abruptly put it in a bowl, triggered the device, and startled the man by speaking. "Wait, Master Rolf. We haven't even tested the device yet. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, my young apprentice. We need to see if it can still open a portal." In the world of Naruto, man, what a life. Shaking the cobwebs from his mind, Naruto awoke in his new room and stood up to gaze out his new apartment's window. Additionally, he found the morning sounds to be very pleasing. Nearly 2 years had passed since the defeat of Danzo's faction when the old goat attempted to unseat Tsunade, and the fall of Akatsuki and Uchiha Madara. He had just finished the jutsu that his father, the fourth Hokage, also known as Minato Namikaze, had planned for him to use. This gave him complete control over the Kyuubi's power without being overpowered by it. That turned out to be crucial when he battled Pain and defeated the Akatsuki leader before facing Madara, confirming the prophecy that he was the child of destiny. He had changed from being a destroyer to a savior, saving the lives of Shizune and Hinata as well as those who had been killed by Pain during his attack when his old friend returned to battle and destroy Konoha. He used the gift Itachi had given him to defeat Sasuke after he and the Kyuubi had destroyed the leader of Akatsuki and Madara. Although it had been a fierce battle, he ultimately prevailed, and Sasuke was restrained. When Team Hawk returned, he was prepared, and with the others' assistance, he defeated them. He also managed to stop Sasuke, and he has since worked hard to restore peace to Konoha. The last of the Uchiha had been given the opportunity to exact revenge on the 3 who had destroyed his clan. But Naruto beat him when he turned against Konoha. He was then exiled after his Sharingan was finally sealed away by the curse on it. Sakura and he had found that difficult, but it was ultimately necessary, and it was the route that Sasuke took when he turned against Konoha. For the past year, the former Konoha ninja and his group were exiled and never seen again. Putting those thoughts aside for the moment, Naruto put on his regular clothes and put on the long, red, and black coat he had purchased. He then glanced at the photos he had of Jiraiya, Kakashi, and his team. Losing 2 good sensei was the hardest thing for him, but at least he would always remember their names and their actions. Finally, he saw a picture of his mother and father with Jiraiya. Next, he saw another set of pictures on his table. One with him, Sakura, Sai, and Yamato. As Sai decided to support them and help them defeat Danzo, he also became good friends with Gamabunta and both Ma and Pa Toad after they recovered, and the most significant one was of him smiling with Sakura and Hinata. He grinned and snapped the photos so he would always have them. Although many claimed that he was already a Sannin and a Jonin ninja, he was able to take the Chunin exams and eventually earned his Chunin status. He was pleased that he had at last contributed to bringing peace to the land and was one step closer to becoming a Hokage. Upon exiting his newly furnished apartment with the Toad summoning contract slung over his shoulder, he grinned as he saw Sai, Sakura, Hinata, Yamato, Konohamaru, and Iruka. He also realized that he had a lot of work ahead of him, but then the Kyuubi abruptly alerted him. "Pay attention, Kita Yuro, something doesn't feel quite right." "Kyuubi, what are you saying?" He was caught completely off guard when he heard a tremendous tearing sound behind him and turned to see a glowing gate in the shape of a star. He was unsure of what it was, but he felt something pulling him in its direction. Panicked, he attempted to flee, but the force was too great. When the gate opened and started sucking Naruto in, Sakura and the others were startled and hurried to try to help him. Hinata, horrified, yelled out, "Naruto-kun." The group was left in shock as Hinata and Sakura were shaken by what transpired. but it was too late as Naruto was sucked through the glowing symbol and it disappeared, knowing that Tsunade would not approve of this. Yamato turned and made the hasty decision to inform her of what had just transpired. Somewhere else Naruto shook his head because he felt like puking. He made himself calm down, and then he was in a forest. His body tingled, and the Kyuubi started talking. This location feels alive in some way. There's a lot of chakra here. Where are we? Without knowing, Naruto went into the forest and climbed a tree. Suddenly, he was in a completely different world with no indication of Konoha or the Hokage monument. He chose to relocate there after spotting a huge city at that point. Maybe we can find some answers in the city. Hopefully so. Something about this place makes me feel different, and not in a good way. After a while, Naruto finally made it to the outskirts and saw what might have been the city's name. Oh fun. What kind of a name is that? I'm not sure either, but I feel like there is a lot of chakra going in that direction. We might as well go check it out. Naruto made the decision to go down there and see what he could find that would at least provide him with a clue as to how he got there in the first place, because he knew he didn't have many options at the moment. Later on, all of this was making Naruto even more irritated because Ofun had absolutely nothing that he could connect to Konoha. No electrical posts, no Hokage monument, no Konoha Academy, and worst of all, a euro. No ramen. He had entered the city through the front gate after telling the guards he was looking for someone, which was close to the truth. The guards then noticed the scroll on his back, which apparently was sufficient to allow him entry. Where on earth am I? It was strange being here. Nothing seemed to resemble anything he was familiar with back home, and after 2 hours of exploring the city, Naruto was unable to find anyone even vaguely familiar in Ofun. But the blonde Chunin sensed something and turned to see a stall filled with artifacts, some of which gave him a strong energy boost. The stall owner spoke as he approached and gave them a closer look. Hey there friend, care to buy some magical wares for your studies? Huh? Magical studies? The proprietors of the store were taken aback by this and questioned his identity because he was not clad in a swordsman's uniform, and the enormous scroll on his back suggested that he was a mage of some kind. Perhaps he was experiencing a side effect from a spell. He had heard that minor memory loss was a common side effect of spells. Yeah, are you a student of the Magic Guild? Magic? I ought to have realized that the thing that brought us here was a magical portal. Magical portal? Kyuubi, what do you mean? When I was younger, I came across a few magical portals, which are old gateways from other worlds. Whoever opened that portal must have brought us here. It will take some time to explain. Do you believe we can return to Konoha using magic? That magic guild might have the answers we need, possible, but we're going to have to find a great source of power as well as a powerful enough magic user to get us there. Magic is similar to manipulating and controlling chakras, though it usually requires a medium of some kind to channel the power better. After giving it some thought, Naruto decided that it was time to tell a little lie. No, I just arrived here. Oh, so you're a new arrival hoping to study here? You might say that. Do you know where I can find the Magic Guild? Yeah, it's in the academic quarter of the city and you can't miss it. It's got the highest tower here in the city. Oh yeah, there was a young mage who passed by here and was on her way to the academy. She's got red hair with a long tail on the back and wears glasses. Naruto nodded before heading out in the hopes of finding the person the stall owner had described to him. He then made the decision to strike the walls and scale the roofs, which he accomplished with ease and, much to the surprise of some nearby, jumped over the roofs of multiple buildings and conducted the best search he could. Then there was a cry, "Leave me alone." Naruto heard a female voice and realized that the person was in trouble. He went in that direction and found a young woman with deep red hair and glasses being cornered by two unwashed thugs. Naruto knew that this must be the person the stall owner had mentioned, but wow, she was gorgeous. Naruto was able to step back from his thoughts long enough to realize that the thugs were up to something and that he needed to assist. Isla was unhappy about this because she was trying to prepare a spell and the thugs were pursuing her after she left the city watch's eyes. After shopping in Ofun's magical artifacts quarter, she attempted to hide in the alleys, but because she had not left the guild as frequently as the other students, she did not know the city as well as they did, and now she was in the middle of it. Stay away from me, the men chuckled, but they were determined not to pay attention because they knew she looked like a merchant's daughter and would be very valuable to her parents, especially since it had been a long time. Don't worry little Elde, we're just going to have some fun with you. Yeah, it's been a while now. Isla could still see the lustful expressions on their faces, and as she attempted to concentrate her spell before letting loose a strong flare, she became even more alarmed. She attempted to flee after surprising the thugs with that, but one of them tripped her and she lost her glasses. The thug's voice and a malevolent hand gripped her arm. So a magic user, eh? This will be great. Isla was on the verge of crying and pleading for help. When the thug let go and let out a cry of pain, she got what she wanted. She scurried away and found her glasses, but she heard more cries of pain, and when she put them on, she realized that she and her tormentors weren't alone. "Leave the lady alone, you rats." When Isla turned to face her rescuer, she saw a young man with spiky blonde hair, a huge scroll on his back, a black long-sleeved shirt of some kind, pants, sandals, and a red coat with black flames. He also had a pouch of some kind on his left leg. Then she glanced at the face and gasped when she saw how attractive his rescuer was. Although he had 3 marks on his cheeks, they didn't take away from his well-proportioned face or deep blue eyes. His headband featured an odd spiral symbol that looked like a leaf. Hey, Minato was thought to be very attractive, and since Jiraiya said that Naruto resembles his father so much, it is certain that at the age of 17, Naruto will resemble his father. When Isla noticed that some of the thugs had been hurt by odd metallic weapons shaped like stars, they removed and discarded them along with their knives and short swords. "You punk, we're going to cut you up," with a scowl, Naruto answered. "I don't think so, Kage Bushin no Jutsu." There were smoke explosions, and instead of a single man, there were a dozen nearby who resembled him, leaving Isla and the thugs stunned. As Naruto and his Kage Bushin used their taijutsu to battle, the group charged at them before the thugs could react. The blonde Chunin had a level of skill equal to his old friend Lee when he was still a genin, because Guy had taught him a good number of moves to honor Kakashi. The blows sent the thugs reeling to the ground because they were unable to defend themselves effectively, and they collapsed back down with injuries and bruises they were unaware they had. The unidentified arrival then extended his hand to one of the other copies, and as the other copy started to move, a glowing sphere appeared on the new arrival's hand. Without saying anything else, the arrival then slammed the sphere against a nearby wall. When the dust and stone fragments cleared, the thugs gasped and felt like urinating in their pants because of the huge hole in the wall. The man spoke them while he was joined by another copy, and then the same sphere of glowing light returned to his hand. The thugs and Isla were shocked by the enormous explosion that followed. "Unless you all want that to tear you all open, I suggest you run." The thugs heeded the advice and fled. It was painful enough to face a man who could replicate himself and strike like a sledgehammer, but they intended to stay for the challenge of facing a mage who could tear them apart with that spell of his like tissue paper. Isla had never heard of that move before, so she was impressed. Her rescuer's ability to perform it without a wand was truly amazing. As he extended his hand to help her up off the ground she was sitting on, she turned to face her rescuer. She blushed a little, took his hand, and then, remembering her manners, spoke as soon as she stood up. "Thank you, my name is Isla." At that, Naruto grinned and answered, "My name's Naruto, Naruto Uzumaki." At that moment, a certain headmaster of the Magic Guild and the City Watch arrived. When Headmaster Carwes arrived, he discovered a number of unwashed men fleeing as though they had spotted a dragon pursuing them. He had been on a regular trip to the market to inspect the newest inventory of goods and magical components to add to the academy selection when he noticed a huge spike in spiritual energies. When Isla brought a newcomer, someone he had never met before, he noticed the destruction on the wall and couldn't help but feel the energy that the elemental spirits had released, and he could see a lot of power emanating from the young man who was walking toward him with Isla. This young man would turn out to be a fascinating individual. Later on, Carwes, her classmate Jean, and Isla all observed as Naruto quickly consumed the food. Naruto had consumed 3 beef steaks, a whole roasted chicken, some bread, and a large amount of hot soup made with fish, squid, and crabs. They had never seen someone pack away so much food in their lives. Where was he hiding everything? Naruto had no idea how hungry he was, and even though he really wanted ramen, he had to make do. He already knew that he couldn't use Ryo because he had seen people pay with actual gold coins, so he knew that paper money was useless. He would have to find other ways to get money, but at least he was getting a free meal. When he finished, he sighed and answered, "Now I am full, thanks a great deal for the food, Mr. Carwes." Carwes grinned. He had always been referred to as Master Carwes, so being called Mr. was a bit of a shift. "You are quite welcome, Naruto. I have to thank you for saving one of my academy's students." "Yes. That was amazing the way you were able to make those copies of yourself and then summoning that massive energy sphere to send those men running, and without a wand too." "What do you mean by that, Isla?" With a smile on her face and a lot of hero worship in her eyes, Isla started telling Carwes what she had witnessed Naruto do to save her life. "It was amazing, Master Carwes. He threw those star-like weapons at the thugs to wound them and then created copies of himself without a wand. He and the copies attacked so fast, bam, whop, and defeated the thugs like they were mere children, and he then used one of the copies to create a sphere of pure light and then he slammed it into the wall and it exploded. Boom. When the dust cleared, there was a massive hole in the wall, and when Naruto and his copy made another one, the thugs just left. As head of the Magic Guild, Carwes was intrigued because he had heard of spells that could make copies of the caster but had never heard of it being done without a wand. If this young man could do that without a wand, he would undoubtedly become a powerful mage with the correct training. Naruto scratched his head and pondered how he would explain his abilities. It seemed that the people here were unfamiliar with chakra, so he would have to repeat the explanation. He needed help, and since Isla, Carwes, and Jean were all magic users, they could provide it. It was already confusing to be in a place where no one knew who or what he was, and the fact that the things he usually knew existed a euro, such as TV, electricity, refrigeration, and Morea euro, were not there was starting to get to him. Actually, that wasn't magic. Oh, you're not a magic user? I rather doubt that. Anyone who could create copies of himself and then create powerful sphere of energy must be a magic user. Naruto answered, shaking his head. Those things I did required me to use chakra. Actually, they don't use magic. The head of the magic guild in Ofun chose to ask the question, which surprised Isla, Jean, and Carwes because they had never heard of chakra before. What is Naruto's chakra? Naruto scratched his head, wishing he had more time to explain things, but he made the decision to educate his companions as best he could, recalling the academy lectures he had attended and Iruka's remarks regarding chakra. Chakra, an energy source found in living things like plants, animals, and humans, comes from two sources: the physical energy found in the body and cells, and the spiritual and mental energy gained via experience and exercise. Where I'm from, we make jutsus using chakra. Justice, Naruto responded with a nod. Jutsus are techniques that are solely dependent on chakra to function. Low-level jutsus require very little chakra, while jutsus like the Kage Bushin no Jutsu require a lot. You could refer to it as magic where I come from because of the size and complexity of the jutsu, which requires more chakra to perform successfully. For some jutsus that need elemental affinity, chakra can be helpful because it even has an elemental affinity. Affinity for elements. Yes, where I'm from, there are at least 5 different kinds of elemental chakras: fire, wind, water, earth, and lightning. Back home, we use a unique paper made from trees that are fed chakra. When chakra passes through it, it reacts by burning to ash, crumpling under lightning, falling apart when the earth is touched, tearing in two by wind, and soaking in water. I am more adept at using wind-based jutsu because I am a wind chakra type. 2 chakra types can occasionally combine to form a completely new element, which can have great power. To properly use chakra for a jutsu, we primarily use hand seals, though there are numerous combinations. Interesting. So, Naruto, where are you from? In the many years before I decided to establish the Magic Academy here in Ofun, I had never heard of anything like this. Are there others who are similar to you? The blonde Shunin knew that he needed to be in a much safer place to get things done, so he spoke to them. Naruto looked around, worried about what he was going to say, and how much he needed help from Carwes and Isla, if they could help at all. I don't think it's appropriate to discuss these issues in a restaurant. Is there somewhere much more private? Carwes knew of 2 places they could go, and since that one was a little closer, it was all the better. He also had an old friend who might be open to hearing this. Carwes could tell that this was a serious situation. In Miley's temple, wow, a euro, what a placia euro. To his surprise, the great majority of them were women, and many of them were attractive. Isla had wanted to accompany them, but she had to return because she still needed to study for her lessons. Naruto had seen many places over the years, but this one was the first time he had ever entered a temple. As Carwes called it, there were a lot of people in the temple, all wearing some kind of long white dress with embroidery on it, a short cap, and a short cap in green or light blue. He was older now and perhaps his pervy sage teacher had finally rubbed off on him, but he still hoped to see Sakura and Hinata again, so he managed to refocus his thoughts, but he had to admit that seeing a beautiful woman, or several beautiful women, could easily grab him. Naruto thought melancholy of the pervy sage who was both his father's sensei and his godfather, but he set those thoughts aside as they entered a large room with a table and some chairs and a woman with long auburn hair wearing robes that were similar to Carwes but different, almost more holy in nature. Reminding him of Shien's own robes as a priestess. She had a motherly smile, which put him at ease. Hello there, Carwes, it's always a pleasure to see you here. Carwes answered with a smile. It's nice to see you too. Jenny, I want you to meet Naruto Uzumaki, a young man who has a remarkable talent and, from what I can tell, a lot of promise as a sorcerer. However, he has a lot to share with us, some of which is too personal to share elsewhere. I see a euro. Welcome then, Naruto Uzumaki. My name is Jenny and I am head priestess of Miley the war god. Carwes and I were partners and good friends for many years and I am happy to welcome you here. As the 3 of them sat down, an acolyte brought some refreshments to the room and left, and when he was ready, he spoke to the 2 friends. Naruto grinned, feeling a little more relaxed after realizing that Jenny meant her greetings. He told them about his world's history, how it came to be, what ninjas were, and who he was. Jenny was a little taken aback to hear that ninjas were assassins, but Naruto clarified that assassins were only needed in extreme circumstances. He also shared with them his knowledge of chakra and what he had learned from Iruka, Kakashi, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Shizune. He even mentioned that he could tell that the two of them had a lot of chakra and that they could both become very good level ninjas with the correct mental, spiritual, and physical training. Before moving on to a subject he knew would be challenging for him, he briefly described to them the village from which he had come, the lands and customs of the places he had visited over the years, and his own adventures with his team. Either the tailed beasts or the Biju, he couldn't blame them. He was making a mistake by telling them about the existence of such powerful and malevolent entities, and the fact that he harbored one inside of him made them uneasy, let alone the most powerful of their kind. However, he had matured and changed, thanks to a lot of people. He told them about Iruka, who supported him even after the truth was revealed, about Gaara, who was similar to him, and how he had transformed the former Jinchuriki of Shukaku, as well as Iruka, Chio, Jiraiya, Shizune, and Tsunade, who trusted him with the future, and, of course, his parents and father Minato, who taught him the jutsu so that he could finally become the child of destiny he was meant to be. He also told them about his friends, who were very important to him and were probably waiting for him to return home. After completing that section, he gave them an explanation of how he got to be in their world and then posed the question that meant the most to him. Since both of you use magic, perhaps you could help me get home. I know what I told you is difficult to believe, and even I find it hard to believe myself. However, I am from another world, and I need assistance getting back there because many of my friends are worried about me and I want to make sure that I can see them again. Although Carwes and Jenny had to acknowledge that Naruto's story was amazing, they also knew that their abilities were insufficient. The way Naruto described what he saw convinced them that it was a magical portal that transported him from his own world to theirs. The problem was that the magic required for it was difficult to possess in the body and would require a powerful source of magical energy, not to mention a powerful device to focus such energy in order to create and stabilize the portal. Nevertheless, there was a chance that Naruto could return home, but he still needed to learn as much as he could about magic because he had the potential and the ability to learn magic. Carwes worked on the concept first. Naruto, from what you've told Jenny and I, you were taken into this world from a dimensional magic portal and no doubt it was powered by something that required a considerable amount of power. Neither Jenny or I have that power. However, we have a solution. At first, Naruto was disappointed to learn that the two were unable to assist him, but he was immediately receptive to the news that they had a solution. Go on. Although it won't be simple, the records in the Magic Guild in Ofun can assist you in locating the materials, artifacts, and potential power sources where you can create a portal. Unless you join the Magic Guild as a student, outsiders typically don't have access to such information. Furthermore, you must be knowledgeable about magic and magical artifacts, which calls for years of study and arduous commitment. For this reason, I'd like to personally invite you to join the Magic Guild here in Ofun as a student. It can assist you in finding the information you're looking for and teach you the magical skills and abilities required to create a portal. Portals are difficult to create on their own, but without the ability to manage and guide them, you might end up somewhere else. Do you feel okay, Naruto? Then Jenny answered, young Naruto, if you know exactly where to look and how to use the many ruins and artifacts, you can find a way to get back home. I have to agree with Master Carwes's recommendation that you study at the Academy, Naruto, because I think that mastering magic will greatly benefit you while you are here. After giving it some thought, the Kyuubi spoke to Naruto. I recommend that you follow their advice kit. They are knowledgeable about magic and correct. Unless you understand how to control magic and what you need to create the portal, you will be sent to an unknown location. After giving it some thought, Naruto came to the conclusion that if this was the best way for him to return home to Konoha and protect it, he might as well learn as much as he could about magic and what else might be helpful to him. After all, he could use the things here to help him better himself in the long run. His quest to become a Hokage was not yet over, and his desire to use his own way to bring peace as his father wanted him to do was still there, and he might be here by accident, but he could always try his hardest no matter what. He nodded to Carwes and Jenny. Thank you for letting me do this. I will do my best to learn magic, and I will do my best not to be a burden to you both. Despite the fact that this was extremely unusual by most, if not all, standards, Carwes and Jenny smiled at this because they could see that Naruto would be a very interesting person and that, despite his past, he was a strong individual who had overcome many obstacles to become the young man in front of them, which made him even more interesting. Then Carwes spoke for himself and for Jenny. Then I, Carwes of the Magic Guild of Ofun, welcome you Naruto Uzumaki to the Magic Guild. In a different region of Naruto's new world. As the dust settled, Rolf coughed and noticed that the tower had fallen. The strain of the magical energies had weakened and destroyed both the device and the tower. However, he had the blueprints with him, which would greatly aid him in refining the device. When the time came for him to try again, he would need to replenish his finances, purchase the necessary supplies, and have some quiet time to work. However, with these plans, this new gadget might bring about a new era for the entire country. After several months, the blonde was always dozing off in class when Foltus was around, and the elderly instructor wondered if this was just to irritate him so much. Nevertheless, he chose to ignore it and continued the lecture. The elderly instructor tried his best to concentrate on the lesson, but it seemed that Naruto was snoring even more and it was getting on his nerves. He knew that he would have to do something soon enough. Foltus reviewed his list of students for the day and turned to see none other than Naruto Uzumaki sleeping on his desk once more, and that infuriated him even more at the moment. He turned to Naruto as soon as he had completed his lecture on the use of elemental shield spells at a higher level. "Naruto Uzumaki, please wake up and let me know if you were listening." The only answer he received from Naruto was a snore, and the blonde ninja kept snoring. Soon after, a vein appeared on Foltus's head, and he yelled at the snoring blonde. "Naruto Uzumaki, awaken!" Naruto continued to snore, oblivious to the elderly instructor's rage, and soon Foltus decided he had had enough and was going to whack him on the head with his wand. The blonde, however, grabbed his wand and responded. The other students would have shuddered in horror at Foltus's current appearance, roaring like an ogre in a foul mood. "I'm trying to sleep here for Kami's sake, stop making so much racket." In a desperate attempt to control his temper, Foltus glared and spoke evenly. "You will release my wand right now, Naruto Uzumaki, or you are going to be in serious trouble." "All right, goodbye." The blonde mage in training poofed away in a cloud of smoke and vanished, leaving Foltus and the other students blinking. He did that trick again. Foltus tried not to lose his temper, but for the past 10 months, the blonde would always nod off in his classes, and then, when he was about to reprimand him, he would simply poofed away, which annoyed the teacher because Naruto was the most senior teacher in the guild and should be feared and respected by all students, but not Naruto. No, the blonde seemed indifferent and did what he wanted during his time in the classroom, and the older teacher questioned whether he was doing all of this merely to irritate him. At other times, when he attempted to make Naruto physically complete his lessons, the blonde would vanish for hours. When he had hoped that the blonde student would suffer for his indolence, he was surprised to discover that not only had he passed the written exams with high grades, but he was also able to use magic in ways that Foltus and some other teachers had never imagined possible. Many other students have learned to avoid Naruto when he is upset. Several students of higher seniority have attempted to bully Naruto and taunt him because of his lower-born origins and his use of unknown unarmed combat skills, but they were quick to remain silent because Naruto reacted in very unconventional but very effective ways. Some students had their potions explode and coat them with chemicals. Others had their rooms painted with something other than paint, but they refused. Others had their robes coated in a powder that burned their clothing so quickly that they were naked, and at other times, Naruto would use his unarmed combat skills to pound them silent. When some of the more headstrong students failed to understand, the academy infirmary would have a large number of students under their care. Although Foltus was disgusted by the situation and wished he could finally remove Naruto from the academy grounds, he was powerless to do so because he had been invited by Carwes and sponsored by the head of the guild. However, the majority of other students found Naruto's antics to be somewhat humorous and entertaining, even to the dismay of some instructors and Carwes. If I were in charge of the guild, this would never be the case. Foltus made the decision to let Naruto have his way for the time being and deal with him later because he knew that this was not the right moment. Naruto had sent another Kage Bushin to listen to Foltus's lecture on how to use magic for this day, while another was sent to the library archives to read up on new books. Naruto never liked to study, but after everything he had experienced in his own world, he realized that education was a good thing, and naturally, he was not happy with Foltus. According to Naruto's perspective, Foltus enjoyed talking a lot, probably because he felt superior to other students and teachers and because he enjoyed his own voice, which brought back memories of having to endure Ebisu's drawn-out lectures. Naruto had a different opinion of his young friend Konohamaru's elite Jonin sensei. But Ebisu is a decent man in real life, unlike Foltus. Ebisu used to despise him because he was the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, but after learning the water walking technique from the Jonin, he had to acknowledge that, in spite of Ebisu's covert pervert tendencies, he was a good teacher. He also heard that Ebisu was willing to die rather than tell Pain where he was when Pain attacked Konoha, and their relationship improved, even though Ebisu remained professional. Foltus, on the other hand, was too much of a man with an overly high opinion of himself, and even though he was good at magic, Naruto knew that he was not perfect. The blonde Shunin probably liked to tease and annoy Foltus because he was too strict, had an overinflated ego, and more in addition, Naruto didn't think he'd last that long without any kind of magic. However, after filtering his rhetoric, he did his best to learn as much as he could from the windbag. Limiting his antics, he needed as much information as he could because he had discovered that there were many dangers in this world that could make it more difficult for him to find the portal that would allow him to speed home. He was certain that the others back in Konoha would be okay, but he was determined to be there because, even after Sasuke and Akatsuki were defeated, there would always be dangers, and his dream was still unrealized. He was still a Chunin, and he wanted to go one step further and fulfill his dream of becoming Hokage and receiving official Jonin recognition. Gamabunta was still out and being cared for by the other toads back in their home, and he remembered that Gamabunta had a nasty temper when summoned for no reason, and the other toads had to deal with the injuries of the other toads and heal as well. He wanted to make sure that he could cover all the bases before he tried anything to get back home or even communicate with Konoha with his toad summoning contract scroll. He was not going to accomplish it by staying here for the rest of his life. He felt the knowledge from the two-cage bushin come to him as he stepped off the roof and headed out into the hallways. He decided to go grab a bite to eat at Ofun's restaurant and entertainment quarter, where he could try other foods instead of ramen, and then use his free time to train in his ninjutsu, taijutsu, and even try his hand at dispelling genjutsu, which he and the Kyuubi had worked on. Naruto. When he realized the speaker was Isla, Naruto turned, prepared for battle, and grabbed a kunai from his hip pouch. He then grinned and greeted her. Over the course of the past few months, Isla had changed from a skinny, knobby-kneed adolescent to a fully grown woman who looked the part. She smiled at her friend and wanted to know what he was up to this time. She had become quite attracted to the blonde student, delighted to learn that he had been allowed to enter the guild at Carwes's invitation, and she wanted to attract his attention. And to be honest, Naruto was impacted by that because, at the age of 17, he viewed women as being very attractive, and Isla was no exception. He was tempted to flirt back when she did, but he was still very attached to Hinata and Sakura, who were important to him. They had become close over the past year after everything that had happened, and although he thought it would be nice to be with them, he wasn't sure that a romantic relationship with Isla would be a good idea once he returned to his world. "Oh, Isla, it's just you. What is going on? Are you missing class once more? If you do that again, Master Foltus will blow a gasket." Naruto responded with a slight snort. "I already got as much as I could from Foltus for the day. I don't think listening to him drone on again is going to do me much good anyway. However, he'll send you back into the forest to gather firewood." Naruto shrugged at that. He had learned how to survive in the wild while traveling with his fellow ninja, and having spent several years on the move with the pervy sage, he was more than capable of managing himself in the wild. "No big deal. I get to spend my time doing something useful, and it's nice to be outside of the classroom. Additionally, I have some privacy there, which gives me the opportunity to further hone my skills." Isla let out a sigh at that and wished she had her friend's spirit of adventure. Nothing would make her happier than to go on an adventure with Naruto. However, she was a novice, and Naruto had accomplished a lot in a few months that would have taken her years before she met him. He had mastered a number of high-level spells and was very inventive in his methods of learning spells and creating new ones, which greatly impressed the more laid-back and tolerant teachers and students. Two of the worst ones were those who didn't like Naruto's accomplishments and wanted to learn his skills so they could outdo him and show they were superior. "So, Naruto, you're going to be sent back into the forest to begin dragging wood? Well, you're right at home among all the untamed creatures in the forest." "Bro, that's harsh. Naruto would insult the animals if he was with them. He deserves to be elsewhere. Say the garbage dump hauling trash instead of wood." "Good point, brother." Both Naruto and Isla turned, and two of Naruto's tormentors, Garrett and his younger brother Hayden, appeared in front of them. The twins had deep green eyes and silver hair, and they had been a constant source of trouble for Naruto and Isla throughout his time as a student here. The two windbags had been a pain in Naruto's ass for a long time, and it was getting to the point where he felt in the mood to do something drastic and painful to them in order to give them the message that he had had enough of their antics for one lifetime. Garrett was taller and thinner in body strength, while Hayden was shorter but somewhat pudgy, though not particularly fat. Both of them sneered at the blonde Chunin. Garrett got things started. "Naruto, are you going out to train again using those dumb methods of yours? You would be an old man before you even graduate if you continue on your current path." "He's right. Maybe by the time you do graduate, Isla would be free of your influence." When he arrived, he began to defend Isla, which made Hayden dislike him. Garrett was also there to irritate him because, in the past, he had been a top student and many respected and feared him. Hayden gave Isla a sneering look, much to Isla's disgust and Naruto's own rage. The younger twin had an unhealthy obsession with Isla and had been attempting to win her affections for some time. "I won't go out with you, Hayden, in a million years." Then Naruto answered, "If I were to recall, Those said techniques were the reason I pounded you and your little brother to the ground last week." Hayden and Garrett snarled at that, remembering how they had once used magic to challenge him to a 2-on-1 duel and enforced the requirement that Naruto wear an arcane reduction bracelet. A flashback: the two brothers were staring at him smugly when Naruto growled and held his wand, with Garrett in front of him, wielding his wand with the glowing shield, and Hayden with his wand ready to launch his attacks from relative safety. The brothers grinned as Naruto threw 3 more fireballs at them, which Garrett deflected, and both brothers taunted him. "Well done, Naruto, you managed to master the dragon's fire blast, but fortunately, Master Foltest taught us both how to use the Holy Light's shield while you dozed off during his class and employed your cloning technique. We are safe from all attacks thanks to this shield, and your attacks are now only half as strong thanks to that arcane reduction bracelet." It was about time that Naruto received some sort of punishment, and what better way to do it than with this device? It was illegal to use magical means to punish students in some situations, but he gave in when Garrett and Hayden challenged him. Naruto knew that to be true and tried an aerial attack, but it had the same effect, and both brothers laughed while Foltest smiled. Perhaps now that blonde loudmouth would learn his place. Tragically for them and Foltest, Naruto had not been sleeping in Foltest's class. In fact, his Kage Bushin had not been sleeping in Foltest's class, so he was familiar with the spell and had used it covertly before. When he had some free time away from the academy, he had one Kage Bushin use the wand for the spell and discovered that, although it could block all attacks, it had to be directed as a shield, meaning it could only protect the caster in a specific direction. As a result, he now had a solution to the two annoyances. He threw his wand to Isla and turned to talk to his friend. "Isla, keep this for me," as Garrett answered. Isla grabbed the wand, and both brothers chuckled at Naruto. "Will you employ that sphere technique you frequently employ? We know you need to be close to use my shield, so try it out. It will easily block your attacks. And once you do, I'll hit you with yet another round of blows, and you won't be able to reach us." The two brother mages sneered at Naruto, but Naruto calmed down. They didn't realize that he wasn't going to charge in recklessly, that he had become more shrewd and intelligent than that he was aware of the weakness of the shield, that, unlike his old foe and current friend Neji Hyuga, their shield couldn't cover them as effectively as the Hyuga family's 8 trigrams palm rotation technique, and that he was quickly inspired by that memory. When Garrett and Hayden saw Naruto form a group of 4 Kage Bushin, they couldn't help but respond with taunts. "You're making use of them, Naruto. You only use them for escape classes. They're completely useless to you. Why don't you give up right away so we can be lenient with you?" Naruto responded with a snort. "Spare me your antics. You two don't know the word mercy if it came up and crawled into your asses and stayed there." Both brothers were angry, which was exactly what Naruto needed when he created his Rasengan. He then charged at Garrett and Hayden with his group of Kage Bushin. With the Kage Bushin leading the charge, Garrett handled defense as Hayden unleashed multiple more fireballs, and 3 of the Kage Bushin took the hits and poofed away, while another moved to the ground as though struck by another fireball. They ignored that one and concentrated on the one who was running towards them while holding the sphere of light. As Naruto approached, the two prepared to counter, but to their astonishment, he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Then, before they could react, Naruto made an appearance, gave them both uppercuts to the chin, and sent them flying. Naruto then easily ran up the nearby wall, summoned more Kage Bushin, and then unleashed an aerial version of his Uzumaki Renden on the two, kicking them higher and higher until he and a few Kage Bushin executed the spinning heel drop, which sent Hayden and Garrett crashing into the ground. Both twins were bruised and ached in places they didn't realize they had, and all they could see was Naruto grinning at them both while his Kage Bushin did the same before they passed out and went unconscious. Naruto had actually fallen to the ground and used a Kage Bushin to take his place on the ground, digging his way to both Garrett and Hayden from underneath. This was the same technique he had used to defeat Neji in the Chunin exams, and the person who used the Rasengan was actually a Kage Bushin in his place, demonstrating that he had become much more skilled in tactics since his early years. Both Isla and the other students who got along well with the blonde Chunin cheered. From his point of view, Foltest was furious and shocked that Naruto had won despite wearing the arcane reduction bracelet. This fact made him so angry that he lost his temper. With that bracelet on, how could he have won? He should have been weaker than a novice thanks to that arcane reduction bracelet. I let Garrett and Hayden use that to discipline that blonde jerk, and he still won. Foltest wished he had remained silent at that precise moment. Foltest Euro, perhaps you would like to explain something to me and Master Carwes about this recent escapade of yours. Master Carwes and Head Priestess Jenny were both in a bad mood, and naturally, Jenny was the first to speak when Foltest gulped. You really permitted the use of an arcane reduction bracelet despite the guild's rules prohibiting such methods? You understand that doing so puts you in danger of being kicked out of this guild? Then Carwes spoke. For years, Fultus, I have made it clear that students cannot be punished with magic. Could you please explain why you have permitted this to happen in defiance of my explicit orders? As Garrett and Hayden were taken away to receive treatment in the infirmary, Fultus swallowed. The flashback is over. Garrett was the first to speak. You cheated in that duel, it was just a coincidence. Naturally furious, Isla spoke up. That's sufficient. Given that Naruto was wearing an arcane reduction bracelet, how could he possibly cheat? In the first place, there were two of you. You two are the biggest cheaters here? Having done everything they could to find out how Naruto reached his current level, Garrett and Hayden snarled and realized they couldn't get their edges in. They were feared and revered until they appeared. They were from a well-known family of mages and had anticipated graduating with high honors. They had also been in the Magic Guild longer than the others and had seniority over both Isla and Naruto. Isla was a very smart woman with a wealth of knowledge and abilities. Her familiarity with ancient languages, potions, magical artifacts, and other topics surprised many guild teachers and other students. In addition to his unique skills and fighting prowess, Naruto was renowned for his remarkable capacity to learn powerful spells and create new ones from previously learned spells in an incredibly short amount of time, making him a very proficient magic user even though he was younger than them. They had a little easier time with Isla at first, but when Naruto told her to stand up for herself and she did as his friend advised, they had to be careful because Isla was using her intelligence against them while Naruto used his cunning and his abilities that still baffled them. It had gotten to the point where the brothers wanted to do everything in their power to have them expelled from the Magic Guild, and Hayden wanted Isla for himself. Garrett had had enough and turned away without saying anything, leaving Naruto and Isla alone. Isla sighed as she took Naruto's arm, moved a little closer to him, and spoke to him. I wish those two would just leave you and me alone. They have their own studies to consider and not waste time annoying you or me. You said it, Isla. I don't know what's with them, but I can bet they really have an axe to grind on me, but I've got better things to worry about than those two. Naruto, who wasn't that dense after all, spoke to Isla after she smiled and blushed a little, which made him wonder why she was blushing. Hey, are you okay? Yeah, I'm all right. Tell me, will you have any obligations later? As much as he would have liked to go on a date with Isla, Naruto knew that his training plans would keep him busy, and on top of that, he still needed to meet Isla's parents, and the last thing he wanted was to offend them. I think so. No doubt old windbag Fultus is going to try to run me ragged again. See you, Isla. Naruto then departed to prepare for the inevitable flurry of yelling that would be directed at the elderly mage. In the woods, once he had cut down the necessary quantity of firewood, he put them in the cart that the stable master of the guild had given him. The targets for Naruto's most recent training exercise of the day had finally been decided, and he was excited to test the newly made kunai he had on hand. This was basic training, but he was still eager to see how much he had improved over the past few months while trapped in this new world. The throwing daggers were nice, but he felt more at ease with a kunai in hand when he was ready. He got a fair distance from the forest and looked at the sun. He intended to master this routine before nightfall, when the monsters were typically out. After finishing that line of thought, he went to work and ran through the obstacle course he had set up. He thought the various monster types in the archives were rather interesting, and he was curious about whether there were dragons actually roaming around and wondered how tough one was in a fight. He started to remember all of his training from his time back in his world as he ran over water, jumped over trees, and threw shuriken and kunai at each target. He even summoned his Kage Bushin to help him create his Rasengan attacks, which he used for both close-range and mid-range attacks. The obstacle course had the exact number of traps and targets that he had to deal with back home, and some of them also included target dummies for both close-range and long-range. After honing his trump card jutsu since his last use in his fights with Madara, Naruto finally made it to the last target and was prepared to use it, but the Kyuubi interrupted him just as he was ready. Remember, we're not alone. After halting the move and glancing around, Naruto thought that his observer might be Garrett and Hayden, but he felt that they weren't there because they had a distinct chakra signature, and the one he was sensing wasn't the two idiots. Whoever you are, I suggest you show yourself. I know you're here. A female voice interrupted Naruto as he was about to reach his kunai. Stopa Euro, I am coming out. When Naruto turned, he saw a blonde woman with long, pointed ears and a very slim, somewhat slender figure. This was the first time he had encountered one of the races he had read about in the guild library. Whoa, aren't you an elf? Celicia nodded while studying the young man in front of her. At 84, she would already be an old woman by human standards, but elves were immortal and didn't age like humans, so they were more attuned to nature and the spirit world than most humans. However, in elven reckoning, Celicia was still very much a young adolescent, Despite what her figure suggested to the human eye, she was protected by a powerful enchanted vest made of leather and mail. She had been out on patrol and gathering herbs for salves and potions when she heard the commotion and sensed something different in the air. She stayed out of sight until she saw the young man moving through the obstacle course, and she was immediately drawn to him because he was a very powerful arcane and she felt a lot of energy in him that she had never seen before, not to mention that he wasn't ugly for a human. She had also seen the glowing blue sphere that he used as a throwing weapon and in close combat, which she had never seen before, and she was amazed by the energy she felt from it. Nevertheless, she was curious as to how he was able to sense her despite her concealing spell. "It is true that I am an elf, but how did you detect me?" Naruto responded with a shrug. "Your chakra stands out a lot." "What did you say, ch? Your chakra energy, you have a lot of it and it's not hard to track. That concealing spell works well when hiding from normal eyes, but it doesn't filter chakra out very well." "What kind of energy do you mean?" With a sigh, Naruto realized that the elf in front of him did not fully understand chakra, and he concluded that merely explaining it would not suffice. However, before he could begin, he wanted to know who she was. "Look, before we go any further on the matter of explaining, why don't we introduce ourselves to one another? My name is Naruto Uzumaki." "Celicia? All right, so you'd like to know what a chakra is?" Celicia paid close attention to what Naruto had to say and was shocked to learn about this chakra. She had heard about white, black, and shamanistic magic, but not about chakra. Her interest was piqued when Naruto showed her his chakra, which was gushing blue light. However, their conversation was interrupted by cries for Naruto to hurry up. Fultus had undoubtedly sent some students to watch him, and when Naruto turned to respond, Celicia had taken her leave. Naruto was shocked to see her gone, but he set that aside as he packed up, gathered all of his kunai and shuriken, and headed to the cart. Celicia had to acknowledge that Naruto was a fascinating young man, and she suspected that her observations of him were only a small portion of his skills. As an individual, he is intriguing. "After a few weeks, you're embarking on a trip?" Naruto turned and realized that Isla was not happy to see him go and that he wanted to stay a little longer, but the leads he found were too promising for him to ignore for long. Isla asked with considerable surprise as Naruto packed away his belongings. The blonde Chunin had gathered enough information to go out and see if the information could help him find a way home. "I found some things that I need to check out, plus I need to head back home and say hello to my family back home at Euro." Isla wanted to go with Naruto and meet his family, but she was unable to do so because of her studies in Ofun. It was painful to know that she would not have the opportunity to be close to Naruto, which she did not enjoy, and she wished he had stayed much longer. "But you're almost there, a few more weeks and you can a Euro." "Isla, I have to do this. This wasn't meant to be a permanent thing after all." "Buddha Euro." With a sigh, Naruto took Isla's hand and spoke. "Listen, I've learned a lot in the guild, and you, Carwes-sensei, and Miss Jenny have all been wonderful friends to me. However, I must go and navigate this world on my own, and if I can, visit my own family and friends. Don't worry too much, though I'll write letters occasionally and try to visit when I can, okay?" Naruto chose to give Isla something to remember him by after she sniffed and refrained from crying. "Here, I have something for you." Isla looked, and Naruto pulled out a small plate of metal on a short, soft, but sturdy leather band with clasps. The symbol of Konoha was on the silver metal, which was entirely pure grade silver. Isla gasped at the gift, and Naruto put it on her right arm. "Take this, Isla. As long as you wear it, you know I'll return, right?" Isla touched the silver bracelet and grinned at Naruto as she wiped away her tears and gave him a hug. Although it wasn't the engagement or wedding ring she had hoped for, it was still a nice enough gift for her, and Naruto hugged her back and said goodbye. She kissed him on the cheek, exactly where his whisker lines were, which made Naruto blush even more. "You swear? Obviously, I will honor a pledge I make to people I care about because I hope to become Hokage someday." Isla grinned. She had been informed that Hokage was a term used to refer to the leader of Naruto's native country, and if there was one thing she was certain of, it was that. In the room of the headmaster, "So you're off to find your answers, Naruto?" Naruto nodded to Master Carwes, and the two of them embraced as Carwes developed into a father figure to Naruto as soon as they parted ways. Carwes grinned and examined the young man. Despite only having been here for a year, Naruto had developed into a very talented mage, though some aspects of his magic were at best patchy. Nevertheless, the young man's ambition and his determination to succeed were more than enough to make him a great mage. After that, Carwes went to his desk, took out a fresh wand, and gave it to Naruto. That surprised Naruto a little. "A new wand is being given to me? Wasn't I supposed to get this after I graduate?" "Naruto, the way I see it, you are more than ready to wield this wand, and if you need a new one, you'll have to be patient. It's not easy getting wands, you know." After giving a nod, Naruto bowed to Carwes, who reciprocated. In Miley's temple, "Hi, Miss Jenny." When he was there to train himself, Jenny turned to see the blonde ninja all dressed up and prepared to go. She smiled at Naruto, who had been teaching her how to use her chakra in a manner similar to a medic nin in return. She had taught him the art of the sword, which she assumed he would add to his arsenals when he sent his Kage Bushin to her for training. Jenny, like Carwes, had been informed by Naruto about the power of the Kage Bushin jutsu and acknowledged that such a technique was truly powerful. This made them respect Naruto for his willingness to use such a method despite the risks. She knew Naruto was going out to find whatever he could to get the supplies, tools, and resources to get him back, so they hugged each other. Naruto was one of her best students in both first aid and swordplay. "I am going to miss you, Naruto. Don't worry, Miss Jenny, considering all I have learned from you and Carwes sensei, I am more than able to handle myself." After a little chuckle, Jenny pulled out a wrapped gift package. "Here, I had this personally made for you to use when the time is right." Naruto opened the package to discover that Jenny had given him a katana. It was made of specially tempered and hardened steel and was extremely well sharpened. It was long, nearly resembling a samurai's blade, but it was straight and had a small circular handguard. It was nearly identical to the sword Sasuke had once owned, but it had a fox head on the pommel and flame patterns on the flat of the blade. After admiring the blade, he put it back in its sheath and carried it on his back with his scroll for Toad summoning. They bowed to each other as they did so. After finishing everything, Naruto left Ofun's gates to explore the rest of the world and look for information on how to get back home. After several months, as the sun sank over the forest, everything appeared to be calm until one ignored the sounds of someone hammering on what looked like a heavy slab of stone. These echoes were not the sounds of solid stone, and the dagger's bearer, a young, small woman with a belt, short vest, skirt, and thigh-high covers with leather shoes inside, turned to her fellow fighters and spoke. "Yep, hollow as a casket this one, and 5 more if I'm wrong. So it's just as we suspected." The new speaker was a long-haired, blonde woman who wore a cap and short green cape, along with a flowing white dress or robe, boots, and some jewelry. Her attire was very similar to that of the priestesses of Miley, and she was one herself, in addition to having a particular chest size. The smaller woman, who was undoubtedly a professional thief, encouraged her fellow thieves. "There's a chance this ruin is some treasure worth our while, but I prefer we have something more agreeable than good faith to believe in. Meryl is right. Is there any way you could pry the door open, Genie?" The woman in question was tall, wore a long dark brown leather cape, had a large broadsword on her back and a smaller but equally deadly longsword strapped to her hip, wore boots, and had the muscles of a strong bodybuilder, albeit one that was leaner and by no means as large, as well as an impressive bust to complete the picture, along with some kind of tattoo on her left cheek, deep red hair, and tanned bronze skin. She shook her head and responded. "I doubt it, Melissa. Even I can't move a stone slab that big. Is there anything you can do, Meryl?" "Nope, unless I pick at it for a solid straight week, or we could try and find ourselves a magician and be able to go in, get the treasure and be back at Ofun before the happy hour in the bar is over." That was Melissa's response. "There is a problem with the idea of us getting a magician. Neither of us has that level of power, and all my spells are centered on healing cures, defense, and countering undead, not destroying solid stone." When a lot of goblins came, Melissa hurriedly pulled out her war hammer, Jeannie pulled out her sword, and Meryl flung her daggers. But the goblins were forced to drop their weapons, and they realized that this was not the right time to be out there. They decided to return to Ofun, get some food and drink, and locate a mage, and then they moved in to fight while Melissa prayed to Miley to keep them safe. To avoid being caught in a sticky situation, the three chose to travel separately and arrived at Ofun on their own terms. A blonde ninja heard some very loud noises in the forest that were definitely the signs of fighting, and he wondered what that was all about. He was a day early, but he decided to unwind before seeing Isla the following night because he had some things to take care of. In the dining and entertainment area of Ofun, "Mana Euro, what a trip. At least I hope Damien's bar is still open." He had done business with a small printing shop and had a lot of gold to save and use, so Naruto headed to one of the restaurants he usually frequents in this part of the district to get some good food before heading off to get the latest news from the merchants who plied their trades in Ofun. Still wearing his usual orange and black outfit, with his long coat in red and black, his scroll and other equipment, and his sword on his back, he was ready for a good meal. But then he heard a shout, and a moment later a man with a sword and knight's apprentice armor flew out the window. Naruto glanced at the man, who was undoubtedly an apprentice knight, and noticed that the bar before his regular haunt had been involved in a fight. He saw the individuals who appeared to be in charge of the predicament as soon as he entered. Although Naruto could tell she was serious about her work as a priestess, He made a note to ask Miss Jenny exactly who she was because, as far as she knew, he had never seen her before. When he would be passing into the temple on his training sessions with Jenny, he quickly recognized her by her cape, hat, robes, and orange sash. As a priestess of Miley, she was also not a particularly ugly one, with blonde hair, violet eyes, and a very attractive face and figure. The other one, who looked tall, was exceptionally well muscled and, remarkably for a woman with such a muscular body, she had a rather large bust, tanned skin, red hair in a long braid at the back, and a tattoo on her left cheek. Regardless, Naruto could tell from her posture that she was physically strong and knew how to wield a sword, and based on the expression in her eyes, she was a skilled fighter, most likely a former soldier or mercenary type. He had met thieves before, and although he had not taken to stealing when he was a ninja, he had to admit that occasionally encountering thieves was a bit annoying. The last one was a shorter girl who was limber and petite, but he could tell from the way she held her knife that she knew how to use it. She was strong and nimble, and despite not having the same muscular build as the sword wielder, she was undoubtedly a thief based on her movements. At the moment, they were up against a number of men who were dressed similarly to the man he saw who was thrown out the window. The tanned sword lady with the muscles undoubtedly kicked the man out. He asked the question, turning to face the bar owner. "Hey Hughes, what's happening?" The bartender turned to answer. "Bad news, Naruto. The ladies had walked in and were about to grab something to drink and eat when they nudged some of those night apprentices. The guys took it personal and tried to pick a fight. And well, you know how it goes." After nodding in agreement, Naruto made the decision to approach more closely. His eyes narrowed as the knights and the woman both brandished their swords. "All right, this is becoming serious. You wish to participate, Kit?" "Only if Kyuubi is required." At that moment, the news of the arrival of the City Watch disrupted the mood as some men, who were only onlookers, started to panic at the prospect of being arrested. Some of them fled, and one of them succeeded in pushing Naruto, who then attempted to correct himself. When Naruto looked up, he saw Melissa, who was quite taken aback by this abrupt turn of events. Unfortunately, the man who had knocked him aside had also sent him toward one of the women, the blonde Miley priestess, and he struck her, placing his hands on her hips and his face between her breasts. Of course, Melissa's response was anything but agreeable. "Ah-hhhhhhhhr. Are you doing what?" Melissa covered her breasts and glared at Naruto as he backed away and attempted to speak, knowing that even though it was an accident, he would be in trouble if women misinterpreted it. "Hey, it was an accident. I was struck by." Meryl and Jeannie were both horrified by how openly and indecently that newcomer had just mistreated their comrade. "You disgusting pig, you were a perverted fool." Naruto gave the two a quick glance before responding with a mild scowl. "It was an accident. I was taken by surprise when I was knocked down, and I lost my balance." Unfortunately, he was having trouble because of his inner resident. Although it may have been an accident, you must admit that the blonde priestess is well stacked, as is the tanned red-haired woman. Perhaps you ought to give it a shot. "Are you insane, you crazy fox? We won't do that." "Are you serious?" "Yes, you damn perverted demon. Stop talking now. You have that red-haired fiend of yours and that elf babe as well. I'm a pervert? Need I remind you of the time you had another one of those wet dreams involving your pink-haired teammate, the white-eyed Hyuga girl, and a few others? Stop talking." The men were stunned, including some of the men who were going to battle Jeannie, and then they began talking. "Have you noticed that? Of course I saw Ida, but wow, that's gutsy." "Yeah, doing that to a priestess of Miley of all things, and in public too. That man appears to be a guild mage. Why is he here?" As the one with the sword stared at him, Naruto had no idea how to escape this one. He knew that he would only fight back with this woman if she struck first, and until then, he would try to reason with them before he would fight. Naruto was not above fighting women, having fought with female ninja in the past when he was younger, and he was not impressed by the idea that men were better than women. That kind of talk was foolish in his mind because he had grown up in a world where women were quite capable of fighting, and he had witnessed female ninja perform feats that male ninja couldn't. When he spoke, Jeannie was poised to strike after glancing at the man in front of her. "Look, I said what I did was an accident. Stop talking and get out of my sight, unless you actually have the guts to fight without magic." With a frown, Naruto answered. "So, I assume you're not going to listen to logic? Okay, give it a shot. Let's see if you can support your claims, swordswoman." Jeannie made the grave error of preparing her sword and attacking. After dodging the sword strike, Naruto knees Jeannie in the stomach, slams his fist into her chin, and sends her flying back into the wall. With a crash, he removed her sword and skillfully caught it by the handle before throwing it to her, where the blade landed first on the wall. The men were stunned, and Melissa and Meryl gasped. Have you noticed that? Without much effort, that guy simply floored that woman. I thought mages fought with magic. With a sigh, Naruto answered Genie, who had been unconscious for a few seconds. You should let people explain their side first before trying to cut them down, lady. You asked for that. Meryl considered what she had witnessed as she glanced at Naruto. He may be a mage, but I've never heard of a mage using both feet and fists to fight, but that guy knocked Genie back. Who is this guy? She attacked Naruto after becoming enraged. You are a jerk. Naruto was aware that he would have to defend himself and that there was no chance to resolve this. Meryl kicked him, but Naruto sprang back, fell to the ground, and then struck out with a sweep kick, sending Meryl down with a thump to her butt. She moaned as Naruto got back up. After taking a look at that, the others responded. This guy is really different, there's no way he's an ordinary mage. At that moment, he found himself facing Melissa, who was naturally furious with him after witnessing him abuse her allies. You have no right to strike a woman. Melissa shifted and was about to slap Naruto, but he was fast to react, grabbing her just before it hit his face and drawing her closer to his surprise. Simply, he said. Before I could explain that it was an accident, your friend was going to cut me down. Priestess, what was I supposed to do? Let her cut me down for attempting to defend myself. This fight is over, so get your friends out of here. That is just plain stupid and foolish. Melissa gasped, and the city watch arrived. Naruto realized that this was not the moment to be apprehended, so he quickly left the building after releasing Melissa, leaving her alone while the genie recovered and rubbed her stomach and jaw while Meryl massaged her butt to ease the pain. This had become one of his most interesting nights, and he wondered why the three women were there. He could tell that they were an adventuring party, which meant that they were looking for a new member, and since they were all female, they wanted a female mage on their side. Naruto hurried to the roof of the buildings and made his way to his house in Ofun, where he needed to unwind and wait until the following day to meet Isla. He set those thoughts aside for the time being and turned his attention elsewhere. Somewhere, although Melissa had been able to resolve the conflict with the city watch guards and the men who had attacked them were imprisoned, the three women were not in the best of moods and were resting in a hotel. They drank their drinks in their room. Genie snarled and set down her mug. I'm going to chop off that blonde mage's head the moment I see him. Meryl whirled her daggers and nodded. For what he did to me, I'm going to make his butt appear like a pincushion. Melissa simply considered her next course of action and responded. At least we are in the clear. However, we still have to deal with the fact that we need a mage to help us get into the ruin. Then Meryl answered. I heard there's another pub that magicians from the guild go to. We can go there and hire a mage. The others concurred, and they went to bed, intending to forget the encounter with the unidentified mage unless they wanted to beat the living daylights out of him. The following day, Isla drank her drink and savored every last drop as she pondered when her friend Naruto would arrive. He had written to her to say he was returning to check on things in Ofun and to get some more equipment so he could go work, and she hoped he would stay longer so she could. Pardon me, miss. When Isla turned around, three women were staring at her. A priestess of Miley, a swordswoman, and someone who looked like a thief. Yes? Am I able to assist you? Meryl was the first to speak. We were here to ask if you were a magician. I am. Why? Do you require anything from me? Melissa spoke and nodded. Yes, we want to talk to you about something very important. Do you mind if we sit down? Sure. After Melissa, Genie, and Meryl sat down, Meryl talked to Isla. We're a band of adventurers raiding ruins. Isla spoke with a certain amount of awe after being impressed. Whoa. Really? I kid you not, that is really awesome. I'm so jealous of you guys. I'm sure you've already discovered a ton of artifacts and treasure. Melissa talked to Isla after the three moaned, unwilling to acknowledge that their adventures had not yielded many results. There is something important that we like to ask you, miss, about the whole adventure. If you find any more artifacts, I would gladly buy them off you for a fair price. Genie spoke and shook her head. Actually, we came here to ask you if you would like to join us for our adventures. We recently found a ruin and need to see if there is any treasure there, but we need a mage to help us open it. Isla regarded this with surprise and sadness. As much as I would love to go on an adventure with you all, I'm sorry to say that I can't leave my studies and I am only a novice, so I won't be of much good for you to take to this ruin you found. The three moaned again, disappointed that they would not have Isla's backing for their misadventures, and hoped for more luck after their negative experiences. After giving it some thought, Isla grinned at Meryl, Melissa, and Genie. My friend Naruto Uzumaki, who is a very proficient magician and a magic guild student personally sponsored by Master Carwes, is someone I do know who could assist you because of his abilities and potential. Master Carwes personally invited Naruto to join the guild, and since then, he has been a diligent student of magic. Jeannie and Melissa were both impressed. Although the woman's name was strange, it was a testament to her skill that Carwes himself handpicked this Naruto. This Naruto was actually personally chosen by Master Carwes. Naruto has to be a skilled magician. Oh yes, Naruto loves to go on adventures and has been at it for months now and has even a battle name. The name is Hokage, I think. That confused Meryl, so he inquired, "What does that mean, Hokage?" After giving it some thought, Isla answered, "Where Naruto is from, I think it means Fire Shadow." Naruto is skilled in several high-level combat spells and has some of special spells in reserve for special occasions. Naruto's also skilled with a sword and has been adventuring for some time now. Naruto's going to meet me here, so you can probably get Naruto to help you unlock this ruin you found. That made Melissa and the others smile because, based on what they had heard from Isla, this Naruto would be a great asset to their all-female squad. Excellent. This Naruto seems like the perfect addition to our team. Jeannie spoke and nodded. So, when are we going to see her? Melissa nodded, too. Yes, this woman friend of yours sounds like very much like a blessing from Miley himself. When Isla heard a familiar, vivacious, high-energy voice, she was taken aback because they believed Naruto to be a woman. Hi, Isla, it's great to see you again. Isla turned and smiled broadly in response. Naruto. They thought they had heard the wrong person, but when they looked, they saw a certain blonde shunin from Konoha who wore orange and black, a red long coat with black flames, a huge scroll on his back, a set of pouches on his left thigh and back, and his katana. The three women blanched as they heard that voice, the voice of a certain someone they had no desire to ever meet again. Jeannie and Meryl both yelled as the three of them rose to their feet, and Melissa gave Naruto a startled look. You? Naruto glanced in their direction, his expression a mix of surprise and caution. Are you three once more? In the bar, the other mages in the bar quickly realized what was happening and quickly fled. Many of them were former classmates of the blonde shinobi, mage of Konoha, and they had a feeling that, whoever these people were, things were going to get really ugly in the coming minutes. Jeannie and Meryl quickly grabbed their weapons and were both more than ready to fight Naruto, who was staying composed. Isla appeared somewhat taken aback by everything, and she made a very accurate guess when she noticed that Melissa and the others were staring at Naruto as though he were a target they intended to beat into submission. I take it you've met them before, Naruto? Oh yeah, and not in the best of circumstances, Sayuro. Meryl was the first to speak. You perverted goat. Don't think we've forgotten how you touched Melissa in public. Naruto scowled at Meryl and slapped his forehead. I said it before and I'll say it again, what happened before was a damn accident. Jeannie snarled again and started to pull out her sword, which was enough to make the situation even more tense. Melissa then addressed the others. Jeannie, Meryl, let's settle this without incident, all right? I don't think a standoff with the city watch is a good idea tonight. Melissa's two group members started to calm down a little, but they were still glaring at Naruto. Isla then turned to Naruto and talked to her longtime friend. Although she didn't always understand Naruto, she was certain that her friend wasn't the type to purposefully grab someone, though she was careful not to express that she wanted him to do so. Naruto, they were asking to hire mage to help them with a ruin that appears to be sealed by magic, so I suggested that they Euro. No way are we letting some pervert join our group. Melissa spoke while giving Naruto a somewhat stern look as Meryl growled and Jeannie glared. I'm sorry, miss, but I am afraid that your friend Naruto can't be part of our group due to his actions the night before when he first came to our attention. Isla decided to investigate the reason behind their animosity toward Naruto at a much later time, but even after he had left, she made the decision to defend her friend because she had gained a lot of self-confidence from spending so much time with her friend in the guild. I don't know how this all happened, but I have to stress out that Naruto is the only magician who can be able to help you. While there are already graduate, many of them have not been in adventures as Naruto has, and Naruto is the most seasoned one when it comes to being out of the guild. Jeannie and Meryl were not having any of it, and they were still thinking about how Naruto had defeated the two of them when they first met. Jeannie was still upset about how he had knocked her out, and Meryl was desperate for a chance to repay Naruto for knocking on her butt the night before. Melissa decided to think it all over at a much better time. But Naruto was more composed than the others. His experiences had taught him to at least exercise good self-control. He relaxed again and addressed Melissa directly. I made it quite clear last night that I had no ill will towards you when that happened, and that it was an accident. Do I look like the kind of guy to go wandering about groping a woman at random? Despite being tempted by other attractive women, particularly Isla, Naruto did his best to resist the urge to do something untoward her, even though his male side was encouraging him to do so already and the perverted Kyuubi was making matters worse. Naruto was right about that. He had been more open with Hinata after learning that she loved him and that she was safe and alive after he had gone ballistic when she had been wounded by pain eventually. The two of them became very close, and Sakura was very supportive of their relationship. After giving it some thought, Melissa answered. Very well, however I must still stress that I cannot have you as a member of this party at the moment. We'll find another way to open the sealed doors. When sealed doors were mentioned, Naruto turned to Isla and immediately showed some interest. Sealed door, huh? Was there any telltale signs of who left the seal on it? Well, they haven't given me any details on what sort of door they were talking about. After that, Naruto turned to face the three and posed a query to them. What were the markings on the door? Any particular symbol on the doors that you can tell me? After exchanging glances, Melissa spoke on behalf of the other two. I am afraid not. The door is covered a large stone slab that restricted us to see just what sort of symbols the door had. Naruto sighed and considered it. Like most people, Naruto was interested in money and was skilled at both obtaining and preserving it, but he wasn't in it for the money alone. He needed the money to find the magical artifacts. He needed to find a way back to Konoha, and it would be very helpful in obtaining all the information he needed, including purchasing maps, paying sources, and performing the routine tasks of greasing the wheels of commerce, as the pervy sage used to put it. Aside from that, he had already discovered a few lucrative ways to make money when he wasn't exploring ruins and collecting treasure. These methods attracted the right kind of attention rather than the wrong kind, and he could have hired out his services as a ninja for espionage and assassination because he had become somewhat accustomed to those aspects of being a ninja. However, he decided against it because it would have been troublesome if they discovered that he was from Ofun, which could have led to some major issues or even wars. He was not in the mood for wars to break out on his world after hearing Pain's side of the story when he attacked Konoha. Finding peace was a difficult task, but he would find it because Jiraiya and his father, the fourth Hokage, both believed in him. He was not going to start a war on this planet. Pain was an excellent illustration of how war and the hatred it ultimately fosters can turn a person into a monster. Wars have a way of producing monsters, and not the mystical kind. For this reason, he flatly rejected the idea of becoming an assassin when it was presented to him. He would have loved to get rid of some of the guys in this world, but he knew that would only lead to problems. He was more than willing to go at it because he had more than enough money for the next few months, and this adventure would serve as a good diversion until he had a chance to look through the guild's archives for more information. Additionally, he felt that some excitement was needed because the week was becoming a little boring, and this was an opportunity to find more things that could help him get home, or at least see home. Alright, here's a deal. If you let me take a look at the door and let me find a way to open the sealed door, then whatever ordinary treasure you can find, keep it. The only thing I want is to have any magical items or objects there that I can use. Meryl was a little perplexed by Naruto's request for any magical items, and she suspected that something strange was going on. This guy only wanted the magical artifact, not the treasure that most mages would have desired. There was something wrong with that, so she gave it some more thought. Then Melissa said something. You do know how to open the sealed door. Let me take a look at what sort of magical seal that door's got and I'll see to opening it up. Unconvinced, Jeannie set out to learn as much as she could about this Naruto that might help her determine whether or not he was a good mage. It would still be several days before she had to meet with Jenny for a significant announcement, so Melissa chose to take a chance for the time being. Even though she wished there was more to say at the moment, they had no other options. She was aware that her group was in dire need of the funds. Jeannie and Meryl both needed to pay the tax collectors, so they all needed to work on that. Alright then, we'll meet you a few days from now. The mood appeared to settle as the three departed, and Isla turned to ask Naruto. What exactly happened between you and the three of them to be so hostile to you? Naruto sighed and told Isla everything. By the end, Isla had to acknowledge that she could understand why the three were not thrilled about his arrival, but she was not pleased with how the others viewed him during her time with the blonde shinobi, mage. He was not the type to start fights unless someone attacked him first. Well, I can understand their reactions, but you did say it was an accident and you were defending yourself. I know, I could have said no to the whole thing and walked off, but when I got insulted, well, things kind of go a different way. Besides, it's going to be all right since some exercise is in order, and I have a feeling this just might be what I need to get some fun. Besides, I have been meaning to brush up on some techniques and spells anyway, and this is good practice before I hit the books in the guild again. I've been busy keeping to looking for answers to some questions that I think I've gone rusty, so some good exercises in order. Even though Isla could never understand why he always wanted to be outside of the classroom, she couldn't deny the results. Although he may not have received his official guild diploma, she believed that Naruto's uncanny abilities were more than sufficient, and she also knew that his other abilities were more than sufficient in a fight because she had witnessed them firsthand. He was not joking when he said that he could open the sealed door that Melissa and her group had to deal with. Having learned the rune language through his use of Kage Bushin in the guild libraries, Naruto had developed a solid grasp of magic and knew how to handle sealed doors. He had also heard of elemental binding spells and locking spells. He may not be familiar with all types of magic, but he was always pragmatic, and even as he grew older, he maintained a variety of backup skills and techniques. In addition to spells for use in battle, he still possessed his sexy no jutsu, which, to be honest, he had not given up on. He still used it occasionally and thought it might be useful. The blonde shinobi mage sensed that things would get interesting soon enough as they both relaxed a little more. Outside of Ofun, in a hut, Melissa and the others were talking about their most recent encounter with a certain blonde mage, shinobi. "I can't believe we have to be saddled with him. Are you sure about what you are doing, Melissa?" Melissa answered with a sigh. "It's not like we have much choice. Master Carwes is not going to let his students leave their studies behind, and considering that Miss Isla's words appear to be correct, we have no choice in the matter. What about Eugenie? What do you think?" "I don't think it's a good idea to have that lout with us, honestly. I checked it out and it seems he's something of a truant and troublemaker in the school. He's never officially graduated from the guild, so I have a good deal of doubt on his abilities, though it's said he performs very well enough to not be expelled as well as have good grades." Melissa gave that some thought and remembered that Isla had claimed that Naruto was personally chosen by Carwes. She also remembered that the head mage of the Magic Guild had sponsored Naruto, so she reasoned that Isla must have been telling the truth when she said that Naruto was extremely talented. "I guess you have a point. Still, Miss Isla was not lying as far as I can sense about his abilities as a mage, so it does raise the question about how he can be a truant and still be handpicked by Master Carwes himself. As I understand it, getting handpicked by Carwes is considered a very rare honor, so he must have a degree of talent." That was undeniable, and then Isla had a thought. "Why don't we test him when we go out to the ruins then? That way we can see if he's got the magic to back up his words." When the young thief finished, Jeannie and Melissa gave it some more thought. Before Jeannie responded, the others turned to face Meryl as she described her plans. "Are you sure about that, Meryl? You realize that we're already low on funds as it is?" "I know, but this is a good way to see if this guy is as good as his friend says. Plus, if he proves to be a liability, we can just dump him and find a better mage to help us if we ever go on other adventures later on while we're here. Still, this plan is going to be expensive and we're going to need a lot of our savings." Then Melissa remembered something significant. "By the way, I hope to plan to take the day off for now since the ritual of revealing is coming up tomorrow." "What? The ritual of revealing? It's one of the most revered rituals in the Church of Miley. We spend some time in the presence of Miley and then the war god will reveal to us who is the valiant champion we shall serve to better his name. I've heard that it's very serious. Oh yes, I plan to pray to Miley for a valiant, brave, gentlemanly champion who might prove to be a lot better than all the others." Meryl moaned as she recognized the scene in front of her. "Oh no, not this again." Jeannie nodded, and they discussed Melissa's peculiarity. Melissa was their friend, a good priestess of Miley, and a great healer, but because she was very naïve and dreamed a lot, she had this desire to find the perfect man. Both Jeannie and Meryl knew from past experience that there was no such thing as a perfect man, but they were unable to persuade Melissa of that, and as much as they hated it, they did nothing to change it. But if Melissa was able to find the right hero to accompany them on the rest of their adventures, that would be great because they would have someone to round out their group. If they were fortunate enough to find a female mage, that would be even better for everyone. In the dorm of the guild currently, Naruto was in his room, rubbing his hands on his set of kunai and contemplating what he would be doing for the next few days. He was certain that his friends and family were extremely anxious ever since he vanished and entered this world, and that this new adventure might be the thing that would relieve his boredom and give him some time to consider the next journey to find a way back to Konoha. Sakura, Hinata, and his other friends and allies were undoubtedly concerned for this reason. He was willing to embark on this adventure in order to increase his chances of returning home. It would take time, of course, and eventually he would have to tell Isla. She would be devastated if I left, so how in the world am I going to tell her that I must go and never return? "Kid, take her with us." "What? Are you insane? You perverted fox? Her parents would kill me if I abducted Isla from her own world." "Come on, kid, consider this. You can take her with you and return her whenever you want after you figure out how to make the portal." "You insane fox. Do you realize the kind of trouble you are causing? Isla isn't a ninja. After that, you can train her. Consider this. With her intelligence and magical knowledge, she would become a skilled ninja in a matter of years, not to mention the fact that's well, you understand what I mean. You are a pervert. Oh, I see, and you don't feel bad about fantasizing about her? Are you once more snooping around in my dreams? Fortunately, I am neither of the three, and I am glad for that. At least there is something to look at when not engaged in combat. I don't need to peek kit. You radiate them so much that I'd have to be deaf, dumb, and blind not to feel and see them. You know a Euro? You've been treating me like this since we arrived. Is there anything else you can do to occupy your time? I would gladly welcome all the dead and rotting members of Akatsuki to come back to life and cause some discord here so we can have some decent enemies to fight. The two idiots Garrett and his brother Hayden are so pitiful that they made even a rookie Genin team look interesting. Fighting those two jerks is like watching snow fall on the ground. I want a real-life OR death fight, and I want it soon before I die of boredom. Naruto was taken aback when his resident said that he had no idea Isla was in his room, that she was examining him closely, and that she had chosen to shake him a little. Naruto? Are you a Euro Eep? Relying on his battle-trained reflexes, Isla gulped as Naruto instinctively grabbed her arm, threw her to the bed, and was now on top of her, ready to strike. He was so preoccupied with his conversation with the Kyuubi that he failed to notice her. He didn't realize for a second or three that he was on top of Isla, wearing just his shirt and pants and no sandals, while she was wearing her dress, her breasts touching his chest and her body pressing against his slim, feminine, and supple body. Naruto a Euro? Isla was not prepared for this to occur at this time. Her deep affection for Naruto told her not to fight it, even though part of her logical mind told her to knock him off, free herself, and prevent him from continuing. It felt good to feel him on top of her and in such a suggestive and compromising position. As soon as Naruto realized what was happening, he got off and spoke to Isla in a tone of shock. I'm sorry. I was distracted and reacted reflexively. Isla. With a sigh, Isla addressed Naruto. It's all right, Naruto. I guess I should have tried to get your attention in a different way. You were so deep in thought I thought you were having a hard time again with something that you needed to catch up on. With a laugh, Naruto scratched the back of his head and answered. Sorry, I was just thinking about some things, namely that journey I am going on in the company of those females. The only one I recognized by their clothes at first was the priestess of Miley. I am kind of curious as to why I've never met her before. I am planning to drop by Miss Jenny's place and say hi and maybe even ask her if she knows this Melissa. You want to know more about this woman you're working with? I guess Isla, since she's a priestess of Miley, Jenny would know more about her. Better I get all the details of who I'm working with, or else I might get lost in the dark on who my partners are. Isn't the first time that happened to me. That was accurate. Their meetings weren't going well when Sai was on the team. Given how they first met, it was obvious that Jeannie and Meryl would not enjoy working with him, and if they ever crossed paths again, there was a good chance they would attack him as soon as they had the chance. Nevertheless, he set that aside and made plans to see Jenny that evening. In Miley's temple, Melissa had just concluded her talk about heroes and the priestess's responsibilities to their chosen champions in the main meeting hall. She would explain what it meant to be a hero to them. When they next met, she encountered three younger priestesses. As she was finishing, she was ecstatic about the possibility of finding her champion, and the three of Tama Euro, N, Gannett, and Joanna Euro were thrilled that she would be taking her ritual and wished her luck. Meryl, who was working as an apple gatherer at one of her part-time jobs, met the muscular woman who had been training with her sword back at Jeannie's house. The young thief talked during their conversation about Naruto. You know, I wonder if this guy we're hiring can really be a good mage. I doubt it. He hasn't even graduated yet from the guild, and he certainly is no hit with the students. I heard a number of them got on his bad side more than once. True, but at least he's no wimp. I still think we should make him pay for what he did to us, and we can see if he can actually fight without any trouble. Right. By the way, Meryl, any word from Melissa yet? No, she should be undergoing to ritual right now. Say, why don't we go and pay her a visit? I managed to get enough money to buy the supplies we need, so we're good to go soon enough. Right. I just hope that Miley gives us someone we can count on. Later on, though it was still only mid-afternoon, Naruto had a feeling that things would get interesting as he made his way to the temple and pondered whether the time was right. He knew that Jenny was currently working with one of her favorite disciples, and he knocked on the door when he got there. Someone spoke to him as the door's slit opened. Yes. What are you doing here? Hello, I am looking for Head Priestess Jenny. Is she around? No, I'm afraid that Head Priestess Jenny is currently overseeing the ritual of revealing to Priestess Melissa at the moment. That immediately caught Naruto's attention, so the person he wanted to talk to was also present and going through the ritual naturally. He had heard about the ritual while learning how to wield a sword from Jenny, and he remembered it from his early years in his world, even though he had never picked up a sword at that time. I see a Euro. Well, can I see her and Melissa later? I have some business to discuss with both of them. No, sorry, this is not the time. After the slot closed, Naruto shook his head and pondered how long it would be before he could see Jenny. However, His sharp shinobi instincts alerted him to the presence of company immediately behind him, and he turned to see Meryl and Jeannie. "You two? Let me guess, you both are here to see your friend Melissa, right?" Jeannie answered with a nod. "That's right, and I take it you're here for a reason?" "That I am a euro. Maybe to spy on Melissa and the other priestesses as well, you pervert?" Naruto gazed at Meryl incredulously. He was certainly a bit of a pervert in real life, but he was not nearly as good as his godfather Jiraiya, and since he was here for other reasons, he was not in the mood to be told that. "How many times do we have to say it? What happened 2 nights ago was an accident." Jeannie responded to Meryl's slight snort. "Accident or not, you embarrassed Melissa with what happened, and of course I have every intention of paying you back for your attacks on me back at that tavern." After drawing her sword, the swordswoman paused upon noticing the katana on Naruto's back. He had left his wand and toad summoning contract scroll in his room, which is currently under Isla's care. At that point, Jeannie made the decision to test the mage's sword skills and see if she could battle without a wand. "You're carrying a sword, huh? Why don't we find out how good you are with it?" This annoyed Naruto, and even though he was aware that Miley was a god of war, he didn't think anyone thought it was appropriate for a brawl to start in front of a temple of all things. "Hey, I didn't come here looking for a fight, I came here to speak to the head priestess." But Jeannie was determined to test Naruto and make amends for the harm he had caused her, and this was as good a time as any to do so. "Let's deal with the now. You owe me a chance to pay you back for those attacks you gave me 2 nights before, and if there is one thing I dislike, it's unpaid debts. I want to be able to pay you back. Every time I recall the night you and I fought, my jaw aches a bit, and that is annoying. If I were to recall, I was trying to avoid a fight, but you wanted one, and I take it you want one now. Less talking, mage. Either fight and draw your sword or leave before I get angry." Meryl also made her move and prepared her daggers, which didn't help Naruto realize that things were getting out of control. Naruto was not in the mood for a fight and promptly pulled out some of his leftover flash bomb pellets after deciding to enter the temple covertly in order to avoid a confrontation with these two. Especially in front of Miley's temple, it was a wise move because Naruto knew that the kid gloves were off and that it was time to get serious when Jeannie and Meryl approached and threatened to attack him. The sound of the pellet going off blinded Jeannie and Meryl, so Naruto hurriedly moved out of their way, but not before conjuring up a lot of cable with a spare summoning scroll, wrapping it around the two, securing them, and then moving away after recovering from the flash. Jeannie and Meryl believed the mage had blinded them with a light spell before tying them up. After glaring at this, the swordswoman reached for her sword, raised it, and started cutting the cable. Meryl followed suit, but it took some time to cut the first few strands of the strong rope before they yelled, "We're going to get you." Naruto swiftly left the area and soon found himself on top of the temple. He remembered that he would need to exercise caution here because, as he remembered from the priestess's activities, the temple underwent monthly maintenance, but there were still loose tiles and other items present when Meryl stabbed him with her daggers. He swiftly flipped out of his way and retaliated with his own kunai. Meryl barely avoided being struck by the kunai because she had not anticipated the mage's level of agility. Naruto was able to quickly throw another kunai at her, which was enough to push her back. She was not aware that she was close to the edge, so she fell back, grabbing the edge just in time. Naruto knew she would be okay because thieves were nimble. However, if she was free, that implied, "Now I got you." As he turned, Naruto rolled aside, then charged, lashed out with an elbow, jammed it into Jeannie's stomach, and forced her back. He then spoke and gave her a quick push to push her back. "Now cool off, lady." The young thief was furious, and Jeannie glared at that. Meryl stood up and prepared to fight. "First you make me fall flat on my rear, and then you tried to make me fall off the roof of this temple. You are so dead, buddy. Scratch having you on the trip to the ruins. I'll deal with you now." "I agree. You stand still and take your deserved beating. You two think I'm just going to let the two of you hit me? Out of the question. The very second you came to attack me. The kid gloves are off. You want to fight? Then bring it." Even though Naruto was not in the mood to start a fight on top of the temple of Miley, he had no choice but to fight right here and now. The two prepared for a fight, and Naruto was no exception. He may not have initiated the fight, but he was determined to see it through to the end. Despite Meryl's daggers and Jeannie's attack, Naruto swiftly jumped over them and swiftly borrowed a move from Leaf Hurricane. Meryl was startled by Naruto's spinning kick, which she could hardly block, and was sent reeling. The Jeannie then took control, and Naruto swiftly snatched a roof tile and slapped the sword away. He then kicked the flat of the blade as Jeannie raised her sword, causing her to lose her balance. This gave him the opportunity to force her back by landing a knee on her stomach. Dude, that kick of his packs is really powerful for a mage. After being struck by Naruto's kick, Meryl shook her hands to stop the shaking sensation. She then stood up and aimed multiple daggers at Naruto's butt. However, Naruto saw this and promptly used the replacement jutsu a Euro. The same one Kakashi had used on him when they first met a Euro, to attack his now deceased Jonin sensei using Kage Bushin. It goes without saying that someone shouted, "Oh, you. Jeannie glared at her partner as she turned and drew the daggers that had hit her in the exact spot where she used to sit. "Watch where you throw those, Meryl, sorry." Meryl was shocked to discover that Jeannie had moved to where Naruto had been. How on earth did he accomplish that? Jeannie snarled, ignoring the pain on her back, and turned her attention to Naruto. Naruto was about to prepare for another fight when he ducked the attack, and Meryl moved in to attack him as he stood up, her knives and daggers ready. Jeannie then struck Naruto with the flat of her sword, but Naruto saw right through it and swiftly executed the same move a Euro, this time against a different victim. Whoa. Oh. While Naruto was smiling like a contented monkey on the other side of the roof, he used the same jutsu once more, but this time Meryl was the one who was replaced. Meryl screamed as she dropped her daggers and rubbed her own ass after being slapped hard by the flat of Jeannie's sword. The thief was yelling in agony and turned to face the Jeannie, who was equally as shocked as she was. "Did you hit me? What the death? Sorry about that, a Euro? Look, you two, if you don't understand me after all this night, why don't you both quit and stop before you injure yourselves further?" They both scowled and answered, "Never." After getting ready and stepping back, Naruto heard something unpleasant. It seemed that the weather and normal wear and tear as well as the recent altercation between him and Melissa's friends on the roof had caused some of the stone to weaken and crack, and since it couldn't withstand it for long, he was certain that he was going to. Excellent. Just my luck, this will hurt. A crash. Within the private room, is it human? Melissa, who had been in the water naked when the ceremony started and was officiated by Jenny and two attendants, glanced at the water in front of her where the huge splash had occurred. Miley had just informed her in ascending that her champion would be the next person she saw. Although she was pleased, she was perplexed because head priestess Jenny would be the first person she saw. Following this, at that moment, the stone roof collapsed. She was remarkably unharmed, but after hearing a shout and seeing something fall into the water in front of her, Melissa stepped forward. The water then rose to reveal a blonde head wearing a red robe with an odd symbol on the back, black sleeves, and then the voice. "Damn, I think Miss Jenny is going to need to have the roof repaired." "No, it isn't possible." Melissa was startled and hoped it was just a dream, but she was mistaken because she was staring at Naruto, who was also blushing when he realized he was staring at Melissa Euro, in the nude. "A Euro, this is not what you think a Euro," Melissa's response. Pervert. Whoa, in Jenny's personal quarters. "Well now, this was unexpected, a Euro," Jenny remarked while glancing at the two in front of her. Melissa was wearing her outfit and giving Naruto a filthy look, and Naruto had a slap mark on his face. Then Jenny heard the young priestess speak. "Miss Jenny, I must insist that this is against my will." With a scowl, Naruto answered Melissa, "You think I wanted this to happen?" Melissa turned and responded, her face flushed fiercely. "You were enjoying it, weren't you? I'd be an idiot to say I didn't enjoy it, you know." You a Euro, perverted male," Naruto scowled. "Well, excuse me for being human." Jenny couldn't help but think of humor as she observed the two of them. This felt very intriguing, and since Miley had revealed to Melissa that Naruto was her champion, the two were fighting like she and Carwes had when they were younger and Nave as well when they first started out as adventurers. However, she knew that she needed to speak with Naruto about this. "Melissa, I need to speak to Naruto for the time being, please leave the room." Jenny reached for her war hammer and chanted a spell as soon as Melissa left the room, having relaxed as much as she could. After glancing at Jenny, Naruto realized she had a request of him. If she hadn't, she wouldn't have cast the privacy spell on the room he was sharing with her at the time. "All right, Miss Jenny, what exactly is it that you want from me?" "I want you to accept the need to be Melissa's champion." After giving Jenny a startled look, Naruto answered. "You want me to be her champion? No offense meant or anything, but I have a greater degree of priorities than babysitter of all things. Besides, she's got her allies." "I am well aware of that, but there is a reason as to why I want you to be her champion, Naruto, as well as the fact that Miley has decreed it. You have a number of traits that I think will rub off well and influence Melissa for the better." "Really now? What sort of traits are you referring to, Miss Jenny?" "You have the desire to succeed, which I know has seen you through many trials in your own world, and all you have experienced have no doubt taught you much about the outside world as well. You have also shown the willingness to learn and accept things. I recall the time you told me about your life being a Euro. A Jinchuriki, right? Yes. You have endured something that I doubt anyone in the Church of Miley has ever endured, and instead of denying it or giving into despair, you have learned to work with it and overcome all the hardship, and look at you now, you have grown into a fine young man and a skilled fighter as well as mage. I doubt that I could pull through if I had to lead the life you had. Hey, don't sell yourself short, Miss Genya Euro, you are a strong woman. Heck, you'd make a great medic nin back in my world. Jenny responded with a smile. Regardless, you have something that I believe Melissa needs, and that is the ability to understand one another. Now don't get me wrong about Melissa, she is the brightest of my students here in the Church of Miley. A skilled healer in her own right and a good priestess, but she has flaws. Who in the world doesn't have them? Correct, the flaws she has is she is too set in her ways of seeing things in a narrow mindset. While there is no doubt about the existence of good and evil in the world, not everything is as simple or as clear-cut as you might think. You know this very well, Naruto, considering all you have been through, but Melissa doesn't. She grew up reading storybooks and fairy tales and believes that those are real. You have to prove to her that those are just stories and are not real. She has to live in the real world and see both the beauty and the ugliness of it. You need to be there to show her how to not just understand it, but to deal with it in the way befitting a priestess of Miley, and also how to grow stronger for it, and I can think of no better teacher than you. Even though he was trying to find a way home and avoid being a babysitter, Naruto was not agreeing to it because he could tell that Jenny meant everything she said. However, after giving it some more thought, he remembered many of the people he had known in the past who had been important in his life and were good people. Even though they had never been that way when he first met them, he was doing what he had done before, which was to teach others, and he was beginning to feel as though he was learning from Kakashi again. This surprised him. After glancing at Jenny, he answered, "Are you sure you want me to do this? You know that I am not exactly from your world, and I don't know how Melissa will react if she finds out about a Euro. Well, you know what I mean by that." Jenny nodded. She had been surprised to learn about the existence of ninjas in Naruto's world and to consider that there were other ninjas who were similar to him, despite the fact that such an evil being lived inside her young student. She believed in his abilities and that he was not a bad person. "I know that Naruto, Melissa will be shocked and worse, but she has to learn either way that heroes are not the kind found in her storybooks and in her dreams. Heroes are people who are brought in to do things because it is the right thing to do. You have done many things that I know to be truly worthy of praise, and I have no doubt you will do well here also. Are you sure about all this? Yes, will you do this for me and for Melissa's sake before you return to your world?" After giving it some thought, Naruto decided that this would at least be interesting. "All right, I might not think this is a good idea, but I'll do as you ask." "Good, and make sure to teach Melissa about the truth of the world, but do it well and make sure that you do it in a way that she can accept." Naruto addressed Jenny while shaking his head. "All right, I am not sure why I got picked for this, and I still think it's a bad idea, but I'll do it." "All right, now Thena, tell me everything that has happened between you and Melissa. I have a feeling since she speaks to you in such a way, you have met her before." "You don't know the half of it, outside." Melissa was wringing her hands and pacing back and forth, saying to herself, "This is not in accordance with my will at all." Then Naruto spoke to her as he left the room. "Hey Melissa, Miss Jenny wants a word with you. By the way, it looks like you are going to be stuck with me for a while." After that, Naruto chose to make fun of Melissa by grinning at her intensely, which caused her to shudder a little as he left. Melissa talked to her superior in the church as soon as she entered. "Missy Jenny, this is against my will. I can't have him as my champion." "Oh, why do you say that, Melissa?" "Because he is unprincipled, ill-mannered, and more. He struck one of my friends twice, even if Jeannie was a woman. And Hey did something perverted to me before what happened in the sacred area. No gentleman should ever do that to a woman in public." Jenny, however, was well aware of what Melissa was discussing. Naruto had told her about his first encounter with Melissa and her friends Jeannie and Meryl, explaining that it was an accident and that, although he acknowledged that he liked it to some extent, he was not the type to attack a woman arbitrarily. He had attempted to reason with them before he had to fight to protect himself from Meryl's kick and Jeannie's attack. Although it is considered polite to avoid hitting women, Jenny remembered that Naruto came from a world where men did not listen to that advice and that there were female ninjas, many of whom were even more lethal than the males. Naruto is therefore not above striking a woman in battle to protect himself, and given his life and the perils in his world, she couldn't hold Naruto accountable. "I see however you have to follow the rules of our church, Melissa. Miley did state that the next person you will see shall be your champion, and the first person whom you saw was Naruto. Personally, I think he is a good choice despite what most would think." "You know him?" "Yes, he and I have known each other since he started being a student in the guild under Carwes's personal sponsorship, and he is a gifted mage, despite what others may say. Plus let's just say he is full of surprises." But still a Euro, he doesn't exactly strike me as a worthy champion, Miss Jenny. And he smiled at me in a very ungentlemanly manner. True, but I recall an old saying in my youth when I first started adventuring with Carwes when we were your age and Naruto's, it was a Euro. Do not judge a book by its cover. I am very sure you are familiar with the saying. After all, Naruto is a very interesting young man with considerable talents. Otherwise Carwes would have never allowed him to be in the guild, not to mention other traits and secrets. Secrets? Yes, Melissa. You have to learn more about Naruto to truly understand why he is your champion, and you have to do what you can to learn all that you can about him, even sleep with him if it comes to that. Even though it was intended as a joke and a figure of speech, Melissa was sufficiently mortified by it to turn as pale as her own robes. Priestess Jenny has GONNED crazy? SSS sleep with him? I have to be in bed with that man? Jenny responded after noticing that Melissa was thinking in a very unhealthy way. That was a figure of speech, Melissa, calm down. Anyway, it still stands. He is your champion and you must serve him to the best of your abilities. Do you understand me, Melissa? Melissa wished that this were not the case, but she recovered and nodded. Yes, Priestess Jenny. Although her mind was actually in disarray, she made an effort to maintain her composure as she left. This is not what I want, in the dorm of the guild. As he returned to his room and sat on his bed, Naruto slapped his forehead. He had no idea how he got into this situation or why God had chosen him for this position, but he had made a commitment and, as a future Hokage, he had to honor it. Even though he didn't look forward to it because he had other priorities, he knew without a doubt that Melissa was having a tantrum with her friends at the moment. He was forced to deal with it. The following day, not only was Naruto going to be Melissa's hero, but they would now have to live with him for the rest of their lives, which upset Jeannie and Meryl. They had hoped to get the mage to open the ruins, retrieve the treasure, and then leave him to continue after giving him his part, as they did make a deal on the matter. But instead they had spent the early morning listening to Melissa lament that she had the haughty blonde mage as her hero. However, they were now permanently confined to him. Jeannie had inquired as to whether Melissa could repeat the ritual, since perhaps Miley had erred. Melissa shook her head, stating that the ritual could only be performed once and that Miley was not making a mistake because he was the war god and could not possibly be mistaken. Meryl and Jeannie were not pleased with this, but since they had no other option, they packed up their belongings and waited for Naruto to arrive after receiving instructions to the residence of the former soldier and knight of Ofun. The blonde shinobi mage had his wand, katana, and toad summoning contract scroll on his back. Naruto scowled at the enormous quantity of objects in front of him and gave Meryl, Melissa, and Jeannie a very irritated look because, out of everything he had anticipated from them, this was not one of them. He became even more irritated because they expected him to bring all of their gear into combat. For Kami's sake, he should have been a mage, not a fucking mule. You want me to carry all this? What do I look like, a pack mule? To Naruto's chagrin, there were numerous silver-plated plates and cutlery, as well as a whole tea set, weapons, tools, books, and other supplies. After all, who the hell would bring a whole tea set, cutlery, and plates to an adventure? He didn't understand why they were included, and he was naturally even more intrigued because those were the types he knew nobility occasionally used. Jeannie responded as she and the others watched. These are out gear and equipment. You want to help us with the ruin we needed to get to? So here's your chance, but you'll have to start somewhere, and besides, a bit of manual labor won't kill you. Yeah, or are you sacred of a little manual labor? Naruto was greatly irritated by Meryl's slight sneer as Jeannie watched. But Naruto was not going to back down during his missions, both in Konoha and with the pervy sage. He had packed light, bringing only the necessities: cash, food, extra clothing, weapons, scrolls for anything he might need, and some basic medical supplies. If these three were supposed to be adventurers, they were the worst group he had ever seen, or they were purposefully testing him. He discovered the hard way that packing too much was a bad idea, and that being an adventurer meant bringing the necessary items. You said you needed a mage to help you with your search in the ruin for any treasure. You mentioned nothing about me carrying all these. If you wanted a pack mule, why didn't you hire one to carry all this? Besides that, why bring all this? Whoever heard of an adventuring party carrying a tea set and plates? That's just wrong. Meryl answered. You want to complain so much? Fine, we'll find another mage to help us. With a snort, Naruto crossed his arms in response. And I suppose it's escaped your attention that there are no other mages willing to go out on adventures, and if you're going to ask Isla to help, then forget it. She's got her studies to work on. I'm the only mage here at the moment. So unless you have summoning contract with any of the other mages, I am the only one. You go to Euro, and the longer we stay here arguing, the bigger chance of some other party looking for this ruin you guys are going to. The three were aware that he was correct and that the longer they argued with him, the more likely it was that other parties would be present even though it hurt to admit it. Meryl and Jeannie did not want to let this argument go to him. They wanted to make up for what he had done the previous 2 nights, and since this was as good a chance as any to do so, they would do everything in their power to put him to the test. Then Jeannie answered, "If you won't hold it for us, then you are not coming to the ruins at Euro." But Naruto snorted, "Fine, if I don't go with you, the magical seal door stays there in place and you don't get your treasure." Naruto was adamant about his position, and the 3 found themselves at a standstill once more. Someone eventually had to give up, and it wasn't Naruto. Jeannie could see that the mage was not going to back down, and she had to concede that it was somewhat admirable that he would not be intimidated. This one at least has some backbone. If she and the others had known how hard Naruto had to train to reach his current level, they would have realized that Naruto did not consider carrying luggage to be useful. It took him a long time to learn the water and tree walking techniques, and he had failed the academy's graduation exams 3 times before he learned the cage bushin technique. His training for the Rasengan, summoning Gamabunta and the other toads, and summoning the Kyuubi were all extremely exhausting. He also had to learn how to manipulate nature and use his cage bushin to learn the Rasen Shuriken and ultimately the Sage Arts. It was a grave insult to Naruto to be forced to carry these items, which were not very useful in his perspective. Melissa spoke after realizing Naruto was taking this very seriously. "All right then, but you do realize that we still need these supplies, Naruto? Explain to me first why you need a set of plates, cutlery, and a tea set on an adventure. You plan on setting a picnic for the monsters if they show up?" With a slight scowl, Melissa answered, "That is not your business to know. I have brought those with me for a long time since I took up the robes to be a priestess. You're former nobility, aren't you? Only they had the money and influence to buy and use stuff like this. I am not hauling that stuff with me, and that is final." Jeannie, growing increasingly irritated, pulled out her wide sword and answered, "This is getting tedious, Naruto. Either haul it or we get to doing what I should have finished back at the bar." Naruto smiled a little. "That again? All right Thina Euro, if you can cut me just a bit then I'll haul this, but if I get to place a weapon on you, you allow me to have my say on this matter, deal?" This was what Jeannie had been waiting for, and she smiled at the thought. "All right, if I win, you stop complaining and haul everything, and if you do win somehow, you can say what you want on the whole hauling the items deal, understand that, mage? Fine, take your best shot." Since Naruto only stood there preparing his wand, Jeannie could attack him by nodding and preparing her sword. She was aware that mages required time to cast a spell, so a warrior had to approach him closely to attack him. When she saw Naruto move his hands, she launched an immediate attack. Melissa hoped that this would not occur, but Jeannie would try to balance the odds rather than kill Naruto as Meryl watched, curious to see how it would turn out. To the surprise of both Melissa and Meryl, Naruto appeared behind Jeannie after seemingly disappearing. He had a large diamond-shaped blade in his left hand, his wand ready and glowing, and the blade was placed next to Jeannie's neck and throat. What the? How did he move that fast? When Jeannie felt Naruto's wand on her back and felt the cold, flat edge of the kunai beneath her chin and close to her neck, her eyes widened, and Naruto smiled. His physical speed had improved significantly after receiving instruction from Lee and Guy, but it was still far from his friends and his Jonin senseis. But he was faster than most people because he used his training and chakra to speed up to the point where he could easily avoid Jeannie's attack. Grinning, he answered, "How about that now? If this had been a real battle, then I could use my kunai, and with that, I could cut your throat open in a moment, or I could fire a bolt of lightning point blank in your back. The charge might not be harmful at a certain distance, but at this range, let's just say you'd be flash fried in a minute." This startled Jeannie, who questioned whether he had employed magic. "I assume he used some sort of magic, perhaps a spell that doesn't require incantations or something, as there are some rumors that suggest that might be the case." But Naruto was sick of this and at last addressed them all. "Now that I've won this little wager, I suggest you relax and put that sword away, and then I'll have my say on this matter." Jeannie snarled a little at being outwitted by magic, but she knew she had committed to a wager and had to keep it. Although he was certain that she would challenge him again soon, Naruto could see that the woman with the sword was at least being reasonable at the moment. When she set her sword aside with 2 swords of 2 different sizes, Jeannie might be a great swordswoman in this world, but he believed she still needed more training. He remembered that Suigetsu, Kisame, Zabuza, and Raiga had all been members of the Mist 7 swordsmen of the Village of the Hidden Mist, which had the most vicious and resilient ninja force in terms of fighting skill. Considering the weapons they used, those guys were nasty and more deadly than Jeannie. Of course, there was that Jinchuriki named Kurabi, who was capable of using 7 swords at once. He had even heard that Kurabi had almost killed Suigetsu, Jugo, and Sasuke in battle without the help of his Biju in his imagination. Those men were far more formidable fighters. and they would have made Genie appear inexperienced with a sword. Alright, what do you want to say? First off, we are not bringing any cutlery, plates and the tea set because it is not needed in the forest. Second, I am a mage, not a pack mule. If you want someone to carry the supplies, then divide it equally with one another so no one gets weighed down. The next is that you keep in mind that I need to be able to move if I need to cast magic to fight with, and hauling all this is only going to make that part of the job of mage even harder. Are we clear on that? Because if we're not, I am not going to help you with the ruins even if you three decide to attack me all at once. After the three of them exchanged glances, Melissa sighed and took out the tea set, plate set, and silverware. After putting those items away, she turned to Naruto and spoke to him in a somewhat glum tone. Alright, the tea set, cutlery and the plates are gone. Can we go now? After grinning at that, Naruto answered, Good, now just for today since you three decided to listen to me for once instead of trying to cut me down like a reed, I'll carry these items, but only for today so don't expect me to be your pack mule the next time we work together. At that, Meryl snorted, Don't get any ideas, this is a one-time deal. I rather doubt that, since despite my dislike on the matter now then, allow me to handle this part so we can get on our merry way. After setting aside the kunai and his wand, Naruto removed 3 scrolls and unwrapped them. These were summoning, storage scrolls that he had on hand when he was sent here in this world and he would always keep them close at hand. Melissa, Genie, and Meryl looked at the scrolls with some bewilderment because they didn't understand the language. They resembled chicken scratches in comparison to the runes they were accustomed to. After gathering all of the provisions, food, and medicine into a single scroll, Naruto used the hand seals to make the food and medicine vanish, leaving the word, supplies, in the center of the scroll. After that, Naruto rolled up the scroll, retired it, and put it away. He then repeated the process with the extra weapons and other equipment, and the objects vanished. He then arranged the remaining items, including the clothing and extras. Genie opened the scrolls and touched them, but she was unable to understand the words. Melissa was similarly unable to do so, and the priestess turned and spoke. What are these? Storage, summoning scrolls. They are a necessity for me since they allow me to carry large numbers of items without being weighed down, and no, they aren't magic after all. Genie gave a snort. Not magic, huh? Nope. Magic uses runes and mediums such as wands, medallions and the like. These scrolls don't use runes and I'm the only one who understands the language, and it works only with the right hand seals. Plus it needs another method to be used, and that is blood. Blood? Yep, but that's for another time? After retying the scroll, he repeated the process with the other 2. The blonde took the scrolls and put them in his back pouch, but he was not saying anything else at the time. The 3 stared at him, wondering what he meant. If I was to carry them the old-fashioned way, that would inhibit my ability to cast magic as I would be weighed down, and nothing is more annoying for a mage than to be weighed down. Let's get started, shall we? At the ruin, moving some of the debris out of the way was the first task Naruto and the others had to do when they arrived at the scene. He then turned to the others and spoke. So, you 3 are so attractive that you let me open this ruin? Yes, this place was no doubt left behind by some noble family. We had to fight with a band of goblins when we came here before. After giving it some thought, Naruto remembered something from his earlier trip back to Ofun. So when I went through the forest a few days ago, it was you guys who were creating the whole commotion. It makes sense. So where is the door that you are experiencing issues with? Underneath there. Naruto gave the priestess a frustrated look as Melissa indicated a sizable pile of stones there. I'm going to assume you want me to move the trash. Melissa responded with a nod. You can use magic for that after all. Naruto responded with a snort. I use battle magic, remember? That's a bad idea. The last thing we need is for the entire tower to collapse on top of us, so there's a good chance that if I attempted to use battle magic on the debris, I would only make it worse. So, will you be lifting them all by hand? Genie and Meryl watched as Naruto set down the enormous scroll he was carrying on his back, made a few strange hand gestures, and then spoke. Kage is not wearing a jutsu. The blonde mage was surrounded by many exact replicas of himself in a big puff of smoke, and the others were taken aback because he was casting the spell with strange hand gestures rather than his wand. The copies then appeared and were prepared to receive orders from the blonde mage. 3 of them went into the forest, while the others hurried to the debris, and Naruto turned and spoke. Those 3 will be the sentries. Anything they see, they will tell me. Now then, time to get to work. Genie was taken aback by this since she had heard of spells that could create illusions so realistic that it would be hard to distinguish them from the real thing. However, this was performed in front of her without the use of a wand, and from what she could see, the man only had his wand while not using it. He must be using a medium that I am unable to see at the moment, but whatever else he does, as long as that door remains open, I don't care. Let's see if we can annoy him. Neat trick, but I can do that without magic. Meryl looked at one and thought as all of this was going on. Melissa was contemplating how she would handle the fact that Naruto was her champion and what might happen once he got down there in the ruins. She was shocked that Naruto could perform his Kage Bushin, and then, much to her horror, her imagination took over and she started to wonder what exactly he would do to her if he decided to ask her to sleep with him and use that against her. This is not in accordance with my will at all. Hey Melissa, how are you? You appear incredibly pale. Melissa quickly calmed herself and responded to Meryl's question after realizing that her imagination was running wild once more. The blonde shinobi, mage, then proceeded to remove the rocks, concentrating on the heaviest of the group before Genie, to the surprise of Naruto and the others, decided to assist. I was under the impression you were not planning on helping. Hey, you have some backbone and you've come this far. If you break your back and become useless, you won't be a good mage, so it might as well do something to help you out a little. As he and his Kage Bushin and Genie lifted the slab and it hit the ground, Naruto snorted. He then went to the others, took the scroll containing the food out of his back pouch, unwrapped it, and, much to the surprise of the others, bit his hand to draw blood. He then traced the blood on the scroll, put it on the ground, and spoke. Go. Melissa had to concede to some extent that Naruto was not too bad, but she still doubted his hero status. The food came out, and Naruto grabbed some and ate his share while the others got theirs. The Kage Bushin poofed away as soon as he finished, and he took a seat to relax for a while. It was always exhausting to have the information return, but Naruto, ever the ninja, took it in stride and moved on to his next assignment. As soon as he finished, Naruto went to work and pulled out another of his scrolls to make sure he had the correct seal, as there were variants after all of a particular seal. Naruto examined the large double door that was in front of him and decided to examine it further to make sure there was nothing else in the area that could prove a danger to him and the others. If there was one thing he knew for sure, it was that ruins don't always have to be trapped with magic, and his experiences in his world taught him even more. He saw the lines of magic holding the stone slab in place as he rubbed his wand over it. Meryl, who was a little impatient, spoke at that point. All right. How much time does it take you to open this? Keep your trousers on. This isn't as simple as it seems. The person who locked this place down had to go to great lengths to do so. Let me finish my work. This could take some time. Maybe you need to read your books again then, considering that you've only studied in the guild for a short time and no doubt skipping classes made it harder for you since you didn't graduate from what I've heard. I was unaware that his Kage Bushin had been gathering information and not just covering for him as well, Genie said, adding that she had discovered that Naruto had a bad habit of skipping classes by using some cloning spell to annoy his instructors, which told her that he was not a good mage because he had not attended graduation. Naruto turned, gave his tormentor a straightforward glance, and answered. And I assume you are aware of the distinction between black and white magic. Are you familiar with how to cast a fireball or a cantrip? Are you able to use a wand wave to create a huge gale or a wall of water? So we can stop yapping and get this treasure you three seem to be after. So if you do it now. Let me worry about how to get this damn thing loose if you are incapable of doing any of that. After finishing that, Naruto returned to examining the matter, and Genie, although she was upset with him, pondered for a while because she knew that magic was not her forte. Melissa talked to Naruto about how unhappy she was with the way things were going. Naruto, you don't have to be so abrasive at Euro, since it's the truth. Melissa, I don't think she could have used her sword to open this door because she could have done this if it had been that easy. I have to work on this now, so take a break but be prepared because, based on what you told me, those goblins might return, and we all don't want them to be gone. Melissa chose to leave Naruto alone even though she was still a little intrigued by the hired Magia Euro. He was definitely not what she had anticipated from a spellcaster at Euro, because she could tell he was serious as he examined the door. The door was constructed from gathered earth and then ritually bonded to the stone in the entrance. If it was struck hard or pried, the spell would simply gather energy from the surroundings and reinforce itself, somewhat similar to the chakra circulatory system in a ninja. Naruto was able to identify that it was an earth bonding spell and that it was the reinforcing variant. At the very least, it made sense. He then recalled seeing the Byakugan in action when he saw Neji and Hinata fight, and his battle with Neji. For a moment, he wondered how they were doing and shared his thoughts aloud. How are things going for Neji and Hinata back home? Meryl spoke while munching on a bun. Anyway, who are Neji and Hinata? Do you have friends in the guild? Naruto gave a headshake. No, it's been a while since I've seen my old friends back in my homeland, and I'm hoping to see them again anyway. Hold on, this seal is almost done. That was sufficient to draw the group's attention. Naruto then performed his magic and chanted the appropriate spell as the door disappeared back into the earth and dust. The three women entered, with the genie leading the way and holding a lit magical torch. Naruto then entered as well, to Meryl's response. Take the back, mage. Hey, this mage has a name and that is Naruto, so use it, shorty. What was that? As she prepared her daggers, Meryl glared and spoke, while the others turned to face Naruto, who was anything but intimidated. You heard me, shorty. Use my name the next time you speak in my direction. Do that and I use your real name and I won't call you shorty. You conceited jerk. Don't call me that name. Am I an arrogant jerk? Okay, so what if I call you Tiny or Squirt? You a Euro. Say my name, Pipsqueak a Euro. It won't kill you and it's proper after all. After gritting her teeth, Meryl stormed off. You aren't worthy. You human flea. All right, however, I will continue to refer to you by other names. How about Ant Queen? Or perhaps I should refer to you as a skinny female gnome, or may I refer to you as a tiny scarecrow? Meryl was furious. One of her problems was that she was short, which helped her in her line of work as a thief. But it still infuriated her, and Naruto's description of her as a scarecrow did not help either. Oh, she was tempted to shoot her daggers, but she had had enough and spoke up. All right. Will you take the backseat, Naruto? Well, that wasn't painful, was it? Meryl, I appreciate you using my real name this time. With clenched teeth, Meryl answered, You're welcome, a Euro Naruto. Then Melissa addressed Naruto. Naruto, that was inappropriate. Meryl feels a lot of emotion for her. Height. Listen, Melissa, I have a name, and it's Naruto, not mage or anything like that. Saying someone's name when speaking to them is polite, right? Yes, it is a Euro. You see, you use my name correctly, so I don't call you names, but she didn't, so who's at fault in this case? But to speak of Meryl in such terms, a Euro, it's a Euro. Insensitive? Perhaps, but didn't it work? Let's go now? In actuality, he felt that calling Meryl by those names was a bit excessive because, in his younger years, he was the short student in the class, right behind Hinata, and his height was a constant source of conflict. Although the taunts worked on Meryl, they also made him think of how he was teased for his height as a child. Meryl gritted her teeth and tried to think of a way to make Naruto pay for the names he had called her, but as they descended farther into the ruins, Naruto began to feel uneasy, and because the Kyuubi had improved his sense of smell, it was able to warn him to be cautious. I can smell creatures down here, Kit, they might be goblins. Naruto nodded, but he was cautious because he knew that if there were goblins in the forest, there would probably be more down below. I got a bad feeling about this Placia Euro. Something stinks of trouble in the air. Or it could be just you smelling your sweat, Naruto responded to Genie's sarcastic comment. If it was, then you smell too. What? If I remember correctly, you were also perspiring. Perhaps you're smelling yourself. Genie reached for her sword, then turned and spoke. Be careful what you say, Naruto, you are getting into more trouble than you think. Genie, Naruto, please calm down, we have to find the treasure here first. Melissa reprimanded Naruto as Genie nodded and continued. Naruto, saying that to a woman is inappropriate. It's the truth to an extent. If you don't want to be said that you smell, don't start by saying it yourself to another person. Though at this moment the scent of a woman is a lot better than the smell I'm getting. A Euro. We're not alone in here, Melissa. Get that weapon of yours ready. When they reached the main chamber and saw a large tomb, Melissa questioned what Naruto meant by that. Genie opened it, and they discovered nothing inside. Meryl was upset, but that's when Naruto turned around and yelled. Jutsu is not Kage Bushin. The blonde's actions were indeed justified when a huge army of goblins attacked them while they were encircled by a ring of Naruto's Kage Bushin. Meryl connected the dots and started talking. This place must have been raided already, and the goblins must have made this place into a nesta. Euro. Damn it, this ruin's already worthless. While Melissa prepared her warhammer, Genie prepared her sword and responded. For now, Meryl, we have to fight our way out. We can worry about that later. The ones we fought with the previous days must have been hunting. If this is a nest, before we end up as their dinner, let's fight our way out. The three of them, Meryl, Melissa, and Genie, prepared to fight for their lives as the goblins closed in. They had all anticipated that the blonde mage would use magic, but Naruto had a different plan because there were so many goblins. It was not a good idea to use magic until he could handle the numbers. As a result, magic was out and ninja skills were in. Naruto needed to transition from being a mage to a ninja. Returning to Konoha with a look of surprise and incredulity on her face, Tsunade slammed her hands on the desk. Naruto disappeared? After spending almost 30 minutes in the Hokage Tower going over some documents with Shizune? Sai and Yamato entered. She glanced at the former member of Danzo's root Anbu and the Anbu sensei of Sakura, Sai, and Naruto, and wondered what was going on until she was informed of what had happened. Shizune and Tsunade exchanged glances, and Shizune was taken aback by Yamato's nod as he and Sai watched. The Hokage was unhappy with what she had just learned and had hoped for a pleasant day at work. She had hoped that peace would finally prevail not only in Konoha but also throughout the nations, now that Akatsuki, Madara, and Sasuke were no longer a threat. She had been preparing for the Chunin exams the following year and intended to give Naruto his exam application in person. Even though Naruto was still a genin, many ninja in Konoha and Suna believed that he was already a jonin with the ability to be given the title of Sannin and was a strong contender to become Hokage. The idea that Naruto would eventually be able to become a Hokage like his father Minato made her smile. But this now? I am afraid so. The portal came out of nowhere and dragged Naruto into it. We attempted to rescue him but the portal faded. Tsunade sat back. This was completely unexpected. Although there had been rumors of portals opening occasionally and that jutsus could open dimensional gates, she wasn't inclined to believe them all. She needed time to process and consider everything because there were too many things going on at once before. Despite being a perverted old man, she hoped Jiraiya was still alive because her friend and fellow Sannin was skilled with seals and a number of strong jutsus, and he might have been able to track down Naruto. After giving it some thought, she made the decision to pose a question to Yamato. Was Naruto carrying the Toad summoning contract with him? I believe so. Tsunade-sama. Hama-Yuro. He might be able to use it to summon Gamabunta or the other Toads to help him. He might even be able to send himself back here through summoning, but that would require a considerable amount of jutsu. Then Sai said, we could try and locate him. Tsunade-sama. He might have been only transported in another country. Are you sure of that? It's a possibility. I know that it's far-fetched, but that seems to be the likely possibility we have to work with at the moment. After giving it some thought, Tsunade addressed Shizune. Shizune, send out dispatches through the mail with pictures of Naruto so we can see if he was been seen around the rest of Fire Country, and dispatch several teams to our allied countries to make sure that we can at least have some idea on where Naruto is. Hi Hokage-sama. While Tsunade considered a lot of the things that were circling around in her mind regarding this recent development, Shizune went to work to locate Naruto. She then considered Hinata and Sakura, who were close to Naruto and were undoubtedly taking this situation very hard. Sakura was capable of handling herself and was tougher than she appeared, but Hinata was a different story. Then she discussed that specific line of thought with Yamato. How are Hinata and Sakura taking this? Speaking was the newly appointed Jonin Sensei and Anbu of the reorganized Team 7. Hinata-san is currently back in the Hyuga estate while Sakura is with her. As Hinata sat on the walkway of her home's courtyard, a Euro, the same courtyard where her father Hiyashi and cousin Neji would typically train a Euro, she was not particularly pleased. She felt even more sad that something had happened to Naruto because she was thinking about what had just happened to her longtime crush and current boyfriend. Here Hinata, this might help. Hinata turned to see Sakura holding a glass of cold water, which she accepted and began to drink. When she was finished, she addressed Sakura. What could be happening to Naruto-kun? Why did this have to happen? I don't care now, but we will find him. Hinata, count on it. But what if he's in trouble? Hinata, Naruto's defeated Uchiha Madara, Pain, Akatsuki, Sasuke and Team Hawk, and others as well, all of whom are powerful ninja. I think he can handle himself well enough on his own. We have to believe in him like we always have. I don't know what kind of trouble he might be in, but he will fight his way out of it, as well as surprise people along the way. Even though Naruto was in trouble, he was going to figure out a way to get out of it, and he was going to surprise a lot of people in the process. Within the ruins, while he was aware that Meryl, Genie, and Melissa could take care of themselves, Naruto felt that the current state of affairs was not conducive to a mage's ability to cast spells. Fireballs were a good choice, but there was a chance he could bring the entire ruin down on their heads. Area of effect spells, such as chain lighting, were also out of the question because there was a chance the others could be hit. There was only one choice left. It was time to become a shinobi instead of a mage. Genie used her sword to cut down one of the goblins who attempted to attack the cage bushin before it, and the swordswoman turned to Naruto and spoke. What are you waiting for? Use your magic, Naruto answered, shaking his head. This isn't the kind of terrain for it. I might use a spell that can bring the whole ruin collapsing on our heads. It's time to quit being a magia Euro and become a shinobi. Naruto swiftly pulled out a pair of kunai and jumped into the battle, leaving Melissa and the others wondering what that meant. The group slammed into the sizable goblin group as the blonde ninja and his cage bushin closed the distance as the blonde abruptly jumped into the air and hurled the kunai at two goblins who were picking up some rocks to use as projectiles. One of the cage bushin knelt in front of Naruto. In contrast to Meryl's daggers, the kunai were more effective because of their design and power in both close quarters and ranged combat. The goblins roared in agony as the leaf-shaped daggers struck home on their shoulders. He quickly summoned more of his Kage Bushin in flight, and they joined Naruto shortly after. Tajuu. Kage Bushin. The goblins saw more than 500 identical replicas of the blonde genin flying over them in the space of a human heartbeat. They halted their attacks because, although they were not particularly smart, they did not anticipate this. Melissa, Meryl, and Jeannie all expressed their hesitancy, having witnessed him make more copies of himself in the past, but never this many at once. What the? Meryl was taken aback by this. She had assumed it was the result of a charm or something similar, since mages could make copies of themselves and used other magic tools besides wands. However, she had never heard of a mage creating this many at once. When Naruto reached for his pouch, he had 3 shuriken in each of his hands, for a total of at least 6 shuriken. However, add that to the number of shuriken in all of the other Kage Bushin similar to his attack on Gaara during their battle during Otto and Suna's invasion of his village. Naruto was holding at least 3006 shuriken. Shiho Happo Shuriken. Although this technique was not very strong, he was informed that it was an A-rank jutsu through the use of Kage Bushin, and even though he hadn't used it in a while, it would prove to be lethal on its own. The attack was devastating as the Kage Bushin unleashed a storm of shuriken. The goblins learned this the hard way, as they were pelted with weapons and heard the monsters scream in agony as they were struck severely. The technique made it difficult for the enemy to block so many attacks at once because it allowed Naruto and his Kage Bushin to attack with the shuriken in all directions. The moment Naruto landed in the center of the goblin forces, he immediately went to work using his taijutsu training. He avoided a club strike that was aimed at his head, rolled to the ground, and used his hands to springboard his feet right into the chin off the goblins, sending the monster flying back into his companions. The goblins looked like pincushions in a heartbeat, with the shuriken protruding from them as Naruto closed in with his Kage Bushin. He flipped back as soon as someone else attempted to slash him with a crude sword, and he landed and charged right, and he dodged the sword strike and gave the goblin a hard left uppercut on the chin, then struck at the foot, forcing the goblin to move forward. The blonde ninja then moved in and grabbed the goblin's sword arm, quickly flipping the goblin over and using his chakra to increase his strength. The throw sent the goblin flying straight into his fellow citizens, creating a pile-up. The goblin attempted to stab either of them with a crude spear, but the Kage Bushin moved in low and delivered a powerful kick to the stomach, while Naruto jumped into the air and delivered a powerful spinning heel kick to the side of the goblin's head. The Kage Bushin were also thrashing the goblins as one joined Naruto as the two of them charged towards their enemy when another Kage Bushin closed in. Only Guy succeeded with his Dynamiku and Tony move, and the goblin fell back as Naruto moved in with a kunai in hand. He blocked another goblin's awkward club strike, then swiftly stabbed the goblin on the thigh, causing it to growl as he unleashed a powerful kick to the chin and followed through with another kunai strike to the side. As both Kage Bushin employed Guy and Lee's maneuvers in battle, two of them also moved in with their own attacks. One used the Konoha Shofu attack, which launched a goblin a short distance into the air, while the other used a strong spinning heel kick that sent the goblin crashing to the ground. Although he could never match the full power of both ninja, Naruto had learned some of their moves from both Guy and Lee through sparring. Guy claimed that with Naruto's skills, he and Lee would both be true taijutsu masters, which was something in and of itself coming from Guy. However, he discovered early on that the physical strain would restrict his ability to use Guy and Lee's techniques. However, he could manage it to some extent due to his endurance and the Kyuubi's healing. The others watched as the blonde tore through the opposition like a hurricane tearing through a village and a forest as Naruto moved in and unleashed even more damage with his Kage Bushin in battle. When two goblins attempted to double-team him, Naruto jumped over the first and landed both feet in the face of the second goblin. He then flipped backwards over the first goblin, which was trying to hit him from behind, and landed on his feet. He then split downward and delivered a strong blow to the crotch. The goblin roared in pain at the hit. Despite the fact that it was by no means human, Naruto dropped the club as he started to move, spinning his legs with his hands, and then slamming a hard kick into the goblin's face as he stood up. Then, with two kunai in his hands, Naruto deflected another goblin's attack on him with a stone club. The sound of their weapons colliding could be heard as the goblin attempted to push Naruto away with its might. The strength of a goblin is normally greater than that of a normal human, but Naruto was anything but normal when he used part of the Kyuubi's chakra to force the goblin back. Two more creatures joined him from either side, and they were all armed with stones to throw at Naruto. When the blonde ninja noticed that, he swiftly flipped backward and shot both kunai at the goblins while in the air, wounding them with the flip's arc. The goblins were injured by the thrown kunai, which also made them drop their stones, which slammed them squarely on the heads with a loud crack. Then, As Naruto delivered a strong spinning kick to the goblin's chest, two of his cage bushin joined him, blocking the club and sending it flying again. A few more goblins advanced, but the blonde Sannin was swiftly defeating the goblin forces as their numbers were reduced by the cage bushin. What on earth is this? Jeannie was not pleased with what she was seeing because, in her opinion, a warrior's proficiency with axes, swords, spears, bows, and other weapons was what defined them. Only tavern brawlers used fists and feet, so they had no place on the battlefield. She disregarded Naruto's fighting style because she believed that a mage could not be a true fighter if he only used his fists. A true warrior could not defeat monsters with his fists alone. She would never say it aloud, but she did concede that it was pretty cool to watch the kunai and shuriken in action. Meryl watched as the blonde ninja moved through the goblin ranks with such ease that she couldn't help but wonder what was going on. She had never heard of anyone using their bare hands to fight goblins, and she couldn't help but wonder what was going on with this Gyuyuro. He wasn't a mage. As far as she knew, he might be using charms to boost his strength and speed, which would explain why he was able to defeat the goblins with just his hands and feet. After all, no one could ever defeat a monster with just their hands and feet, could they? What's causing him to fight like a drunken brawler? Melissa was both shocked and disgusted because she had imagined her champion to be the epitome of a gentleman who would use a sword or, in this case, magic, but instead he was fighting in front of her like a drunken brawler. Having such a vile man as her champion made her wonder why this was her fate. He had magic and a sword. But why is he fighting like a drunken brawler in a tavern fight when he lacked gentlemanly control and used such devious tactics? It seems that the three of them were so accustomed to the way that enemies were defeated in their world that they were unaware that Naruto, as a ninja, needed to learn how to fight hand to hand, and that all ninjas needed to learn the fundamentals of taijutsu in order to augment their knowledge of either genjutsu or ninjutsu. The three were too preoccupied to realize that another group of goblins was approaching them, but Naruto saw the approaching troops and yelled a warning. "Hey, quit gawking and look behind you." When the three of them turned, they saw that the goblins were approaching them with their own weapons and a hungry expression. Some of them even looked like the same goblins they had been battling just days earlier. Jeannie used her sword, Melissa used her warhammer, and Meryl threw and used her daggers. As the three started fighting the goblins, the battle was going fairly smoothly until one of the monsters managed to get through, at which point Naruto entered the fray and started to assist. This goblin appeared to be bigger and more powerful than the others, and it was equipped with a short, sharp, and rusty sword. Naruto hurried to assist as best he could as the goblin charged at Melissa. He moved in and saw the sword falling, but there was no time to get a kunai, so he reached for his wand, the only object he knew would be useful, and used it to stop the sword from falling. The trick was successful, but a significant portion of his wand was taken away when the goblin released its sword. Naruto became enraged because he needed the wand to use magic to find his way home, and goblin had just destroyed it. "That's it, you ugly bastard, you are so dead." Naruto chose to use his basic Jinchuriki form instead of his tailed one, and the red chakra of the Kyuubi eventually emerged from his body. Since the chakra was strong enough to form the shell, he only had to manage its rotation. Once the glowing blue sphere with the red chakra of the Kyuubi surrounding it was formed, Naruto smashed it hard into the enormous goblin. "Take this, Rasengan." Boom. The results were more than explosive. The larger goblin was sent flying like a rocket out of a launch pad after the Rasengan crashed into him, and the goblin leader was sent flying into the other goblins. Naruto also received his wand, which he looked at with a sad and angry expression because it was a special gift from Karwes, who was a good man to him and a great friend and teacher, and it was ruined now. He was aware that they would need to leave the area quickly because this mission was a failure, and the goblins were largely out of the way because his actions toward their leader had apparently scared off the normally fierce goblins, who had decided to leave them alone for the time being. Then he turned and addressed the other members of his group. "Come on, those goblins won't be back for a while, now's the time to leave." Outside, Naruto sighed as he checked his equipment. As the group emerged into the afternoon sun, everything appeared to be in order, but he was unhappy that his wand had been damaged in the battle when he was forced to use his wand to block an incoming blow aimed at Melissa by the goblin that had fought past Jeannie and Meryl. He discovered that a portion had been shorn off by a goblin's rusty but still sharp short sword. The wand wasn't completely worthless, but he would have to find a substitute if he wanted to use magic once more. This whole adventure was a total loss. Meryl was unhappy that their treasure hunt had failed and that their debt to the collectors had increased because all of the supplies they had purchased were on credit. Having a mage should have brought in more chances to find treasure, but we are still deep in the red. Naruto noticed Melissa's dissatisfied expression and responded, while Jeannie sighed at the news. "Why are you three so out of it anyway? Meryl was the first to express her frustration as the others stared at him incredulously. She approached Naruto and spoke in an extremely irritated tone while glaring at him. "Why are you so smug, Naruto? We thought this place had treasure and it turns out it had none." Naruto scowled at her before answering, "And why are you getting mad at me anyway? As far as I recall, you were the ones who found this ruin and you asked me to help you open it. No sense in you getting worked up about this. I bet you're not the first to find a ruin already raided and you won't be the last either. Besides, there are other ruins to look for in this world and there's always a chance that you can get one that has the real goods, but in this case, the most precious thing at the moment is our lives, all right." They were further in debt, and this mage, or whatever he was at the time, was being cool about it. Even though he was partially correct, Meryl shook her head and walked away in annoyance. She made the decision to simply figure out how to handle the collectors who would soon be pursuing her case. Aside from the fact that his wand was destroyed and he would need to buy a new one, Naruto couldn't help but wonder what exactly he had agreed to. He had better things to do than waste his time with this group. He put the wand back on his back and snorted. Then Genie started talking. "Why weren't you using magic in the beginning? You could have finished the goblins easily." "I said that using magic would be a bad idea in that kind of enclosed space. If I did, there was a chance the ruins would have fallen on us." "You're lying. That glowing sphere you used was magic, wasn't it?" Speaking to the swordswoman, Naruto shook his head and once again displayed his broken wand. "In case it may have escaped your attention, my wand is ruined so I can't use it for the moment. Besides that, the Rasengan doesn't need magic to be used." "Did you use a charm or a medium?" "No. The Rasengan is something I use that has no magic, and that's all I am going to say. Now I got to get a new wand. I hope you girls have enough funds to help me get a new one." Meryl turned and responded, indicating that she had taken notice. "Why should we give our money to help you?" With a growl, Naruto answered. "Two reasons. First, I had to sacrifice my wand to prevent your friend from being reduced to sushi by that massive goblin, and the second is the fact that since I am part of this team, I expect to be given the same level of help as anyone here. We are already in the red as it is. We can't give any money already." At this, Naruto shook his head, gave a mental snarl, and spoke. "Of all the things I have to deal with right now, a Euro man, if Kiba was here, he'd laugh his ass off, and I can't even begin to guess how Akamaru would react at Euro." In light of that, Naruto stepped back and examined the damaged medium with his wand. He was furious that this occurred at this particular moment because he had gathered everything he could to figure out how to get back to Konoha, but he had no idea how the village was doing or how his friends were handling his disappearance. He also wondered how Hinata and Sakura were handling his absence. This young mage was not at all what she considered a hero, but she was unable to do much at the moment as she gazed at the setting sun. Melissa was still in a very depressed state of mind because she had chosen a man who fought in a very ungentlemanly manner, not only because he was not fighting fairly when facing the enemy, but also because he was not above hitting women. When she glanced at Naruto, she noticed that the blonde mage, or whatever he called himself, was staring at his wand gravely. She remembered that he had used it to deflect the goblin's sword from attacking her, which made her realize that he had sacrificed his wand to save her life. But Naruto had other plans. Since it would be several more days before they returned to Ofun, he made the decision to go to Master Karwes and ask if he could have a new one made for him. He knew it would be difficult and a pain in the neck, but he was going to get a new wand if that was the way home. Within the tavern, my go to Euro that actually happened? Isla was so happy that Naruto had kept the orb, which she had chosen to give him while he was still in the academy, that she was unable to believe the story he was telling her through it. Naruto nodded and scratched his head. "Yep. My wand's useless now, and it was the one Karwes sensei handed to me when I left the guild. 2 Euro damn waste." After giving it some thought and realizing that Naruto was depressed, Isla had to acknowledge that her friend would appreciate the wand. It was impossible for her to avoid wishing she could help him. She did, however, have some unfavorable news for her friend. "I guess you're going to have to get a new wand made, and that's going to be risky. A Euro, you know you do need to find a 500-year-old oak tree to make the medium for the wand, right?" "I haven't forgotten, Isla, and it'd take 3 days to make a new wand. Karwes sensei told me about it, and old Foltus never let that fact slide whenever he got the chance, and since the guild is the only place in demand for that kind of wood, I take it they have some in stock?" "That's a Euro. The bad news actually, our stock for the wood is already dry since we had to ship a number of it to the other guilds outside of Ofun, so there's none for Master Karwes to make, and the only place that the wood can be found is in the Tarsui Forest." "The Tarsui Forest? The one with the name of the demon forest?" "I'm afraid so. It's the only place where you can find the wood, and there's always the story that only 1 out of 10 people who get lost there come back alive. It makes me think of the Forest of Death in Konoha. It doesn't matter where it is, Isla. I need a new wand. I guess I'll head back to Ofun and get some supplies rounded up for the trip. But aren't you worried a bit about what the dangers are in the demon forest, Naruto? Isla Euro, let's just say that when I was younger, I was in worse places than that. I guess I'll see you back in Ofun. Alright, be careful, Naruto. As Naruto's image dwindled, Isla couldn't help but worry about her longtime guild friend. Naruto had some truly incredible powers, but she was very concerned about visiting the demon forest because she had heard a lot of rumors about it and, despite her upbeat attitude, she didn't think it was a pleasant place. She was aware that Naruto would not be persuaded to change his mind about his decision when he had an opinion. He was obstinate and difficult to convince. I wish I could assist him in some way. Perhaps I could use some of the items I've accumulated over the years. In addition, I could always write to my father to request supplies for Naruto. In the woods, the blonde ninja, mage, was now lost in thought as he set the crystal aside and gazed at the stars. When he claimed to have been in worse places than the forest he would be entering, he wasn't joking. I thought of the forest of death, where he took the Chunin exams, with its ferocious tigers, horse-sized snakes, dog puppy-sized blood-sucking slugs, and more. He could have written a guide on all of the hidden surprises and traps in some of the places he had visited. In addition, he had been trapped with Hinata, Kiba, and Akamaru in the stomach of a giant chameleon, fought a huge demonic dragon alongside Shion in a volcano, fought Temujin against Hado in a giant ship of steel, and was ingested by one of Orochimaru's snake summons. He had seen one of Orochimaru's labs and had fought alongside Sasuke, Sakura, Hinata, and Amaru in a floating air fortress. As he considered the circumstances, he glanced at the camp they had established and saw that he had climbed up on a tree branch using his tree walking technique. He could almost hear his late Jonin-sensei Kakashi reprimanding him for disclosing his Rasengan to the others. He had intended to keep that a secret, but his rage at losing the wand caused him to lose focus. He would have claimed that this was no game and that it was a mistake to show your skills to an enemy. Man, I miss you, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto. Melissa was staring up at him when the blonde Sannin looked down, and he answered. What is it, Melissa? I just wanted to know where you were. How did you get up there? Simple, I jumped. But that's over 20 feet. Did you use magic again? Despite carrying his giant scroll, sword, and wanda Euro, or what was left of Tama Euro, on his back, Naruto let out a sigh and stepped off the tree branch to Melissa's surprise. He then walked off the branch, down the tree, and onto the ground. Melissa spoke as soon as he hit the floor. How did you? Not today, Melissa. I'm not telling any more secrets and I'm in a foul mood already. About the wand? With a nod, Naruto removed the damaged wand. Karwes-sensei gave this to me as a gift when I went out adventuring when I left the guild a few months back. It was something I needed to keep as well as find my way back home. Melissa was a little taken aback by this since she assumed Naruto, like his friend Isla, would have been born in Ofun. I thought your home was in Ofun. It isn't a Euro. My home's a long way from here. I was hoping to go back a Euro. There's still a lot to do for me to get home anyway. I'm not in the mood for a discussion, and you don't need to say anything about me using my wand to save your life. How did? Naruto gave her a straightforward glance. Let's just say I was expecting it to happen at some point. Besides, until I get a wand, seeing my home is going to have to wait anyway. You'd better go grab something to eat. It's still a long way to Ofun from here. Melissa looked at Naruto as he left, wondering what was wrong with her champion and why he needed a wand in addition to magic to get home when he could have taken a ship or a caravan. She still wished she had a true champion to be with, but it wasn't her concern. A day later in Ofun. You want to go where? They had just arrived in Ofun and had spent the day relaxing and trying to sort things out, so the three women were taken aback when the blonde mage showed up a few hours after they had entered the tavern for a drink and informed them that he was going to Tarsui Forest to gather wood from a 500-year-old oak tree in order to make a new wand. With a sigh, Naruto answered. I said I was planning to go to the Tarsui Forest to get some 500-year-old oak wood to have a new wand made to replace my ruined wand. I figured I should ask you all to help, but if you're not interested at Euro. Of course we're not interested in this idea of yours, you blonde dummy. What was that pipsqueak? When Genie spoke, Meryl snarled and waited for an opportunity to exact revenge. You're asking us to go with you to a place where very few have ever come back. Just that, after all. What do you think we are? People with a death wish? You don't have to come along, you know. I only made the offer. I sure as heck am not going to force you three to come along. I'll do it myself if I have to. Meryl gave him a startled look before responding. You've got to be kidding. You go there alone? You're crazy as a loon to think you have chance there without that wand. Naruto responded with a snort. Just because I don't have my wand doesn't mean I'm someone you can look down on. As far as I figure I can handle things well enough on my own. Use those charms you have. Soraya Euro, some fighter you are. How many times do I have to say it? I don't need to use magic all the time. Besides, most of the moves I use were taught to me in my younger days, and the Rasengan does not use magic anyway. Isla's already gotten supplies as well as some spare gear ready, so I can leave at any time. I just came here to give you the offer if you want Ida Euro. Which we don't. Thank you very much, Naruto. Naruto gave a shrug. Have it your way, Melissa, but I rather doubt Head Priestess Jenny would like the idea of you shrinking from your duties as a priestess of Miley. Melissa gasped in shock, feeling enraged and disappointed because her champion had just blackmailed her. This man was so ungentlemanly and cruel. How come he has to be her champion? I'm not willing to do this. You're blackmailing Melissa? How dare you? As Genie attempted to stand up, Naruto pulled out a kunai and kept it ready. He glanced at Genie and responded. I did no such thing. I had already told Karwes Sensei and Head Priestess Jenny that I was going to the forest when I got back, so that naturally would make Head Priestess Jenny very curious as to why I am going on alone. I told her already that going alone was all right by me and none of you had to get involved, but she reminded me that I am Melissa's champion, so I have to go with her. But that works both ways, doesn't it? If I am going somewhere, then she has to come along, as it was required by the law of the Church of Miley. He did have a point, but Melissa was stopped cold by that as her champion. Naruto had to accompany her on all of their adventures and missions for the Church of Miley. However, it worked the other way around. As part of her responsibilities as a priestess of Miley, she had to accompany him wherever he went, because failing to do so was regarded as the greatest sin a priestess of her order could commit, and she would lose both her rank and her membership in the Church of Miley. She was at a loss for what to do right now, and Naruto answered. Look, you don't like and neither do I, Melissa, but sometimes we have to do things that we find distasteful even if they are needed. With a snort, Genie answered. Like you're one to talk. A Euro being the favored student of the head of the guild must really get you to places. Naruto responded after giving Genie a calm but irritated look. I don't use the fact that Karwes Sensei treats me as a favored student to get ahead in being a mage. Everything I've learned in magic I learned on my own. Besides that, a Euro as a shinobi, I was asked to do things that even I found distasteful at times, so I know what it's like to do things you don't want to have to do it anyway. Then Meryl said something. You've called yourself a shinobi before, so just what is that supposed to mean anyway? You sure you want to know? Yeah, I do. You said back in the cave when we fought those goblins that it was time to quit being a mage and become a shinobi, so what is it exactly anyhow? Some joke name you guys use in the guild. Melissa was intrigued as well, and Genie smirked slightly as she sat down to listen to this. Naruto sighed and addressed them in a grave tone, knowing that he would have to say it anyhow. Shinobi means male ninja, and before you ask, ninja is the term for shadow warriors, where I come from. Ninjas form the army of our village. We do a lot of missions that we are hired for by higher level people, as well as take on assignments handed to us by our leaders in the village. Meryl chuckled a little as he and the others watched. You a Euro, a warrior? You fight with your fists? You're no warrior? Genie spoke after giving a nod. I agree, a real warrior uses weapons in combat. At that, Naruto laughed and answered. Then you don't know just what ninja are capable of in combat. To be honest, we use other weapons as well. The kunai and shuriken I use are part of our arsenals. The kunai is a very useful weapon. In most cases it can be disguised as a farming or gardening tool until we use it in combat, and if you recall the wounds I gave those goblins, it can make seriously deadly wounds on foes if used for throwing or striking. The hand-to-hand combat we use is called taijutsu. A Euro, every ninja I know uses them in combat. Then, grinning, Naruto mentioned two ninja he was familiar with. I mentioned Neji before, if I recall. He uses a style called Gentle Fist, which is a taijutsu style, and it can kill a man without any problems, as well as his partner Lee, who can punch and kick hard enough to make stone cave in. With a snort, Genie answered. I'll believe it when I see it. Me too, all Euro. If I can't see these two guys in action, I won't believe it at all. Melissa then addressed the other people. I agree with Meryl and Genie. Until we see them in action, we can't really be convinced. At that, Naruto shrugged and answered. I thought as much, but what I say is the truth. Besides that, I learned some moves from Lee and his sensei Guy, and I used them in the battle with those goblins, so I know that they can fight very seriously when the need comes to it. Guy is the strongest master of taijutsu in our village, despite his Euro rather unique antics. Then Meryl said something. You guys take missions, so ninjas are like mercenaries? You might say that. We are an official army, but we take assignments from allied or neutral parties. What sort of jobs do you do? That depends on the requirements and the type of mission. Some missions are handed to lower-ranking ninja, other missions are to mid-rank ninja, such as escort missions, and involves combat to a degree. As well as dealing with deadly animals and creating out booby traps, Higher missions can include escorting high-ranking or key personnel, gathering information on other nations, as well as disposing of enemy ninja. The second highest missions involve open warfare as well as vital missions for nations, escorting high-ranking VIPs, and battle maneuvers against opposing forces. Those missions are ranked from D to A. The highest are S-ranked missions. Those can be escorting or protecting vital documents and information and assassination of key personnel. The higher the risk, the higher the payment. A euro. Melissa blushed when she heard a specific word. Wait a minute, a euro? Did you just say that you a euro assassinate people for money? Naruto gave that a nod. He was certain that even his Jonin friend Neji had previously been assigned that task, and Kakashi had also taken those missions. That was a part of the job of being a ninja, and other ninja had completed missions with that requirement. He was accustomed to that part of being a ninja because even his father, Minato, had taken them. Ninjas work as spies, soldiers, guards, and assassins. It's what we do. Is there a problem with that? Shocked, Melissa got to her feet, slammed her hands on the table, and let out a horrified cry. You're an assassin? You're a murderer? Within the tavern? Looking at the disbelieving priestess, Naruto realized that this was the typical response because, based on his knowledge of this world during his time here, assassins were not exactly the most popular or well-respected individuals on the planet. Hey, there's a fine line between assassin and murderer, Melissa, and I haven't crossed that line yet. Melissa spoke out in a rage, still in a state of shock. How can you say that? You just said that ninjas assassinate people for money. That's just immoral, and a euro and barbaric. Excuse me? Melissa responded to that in a very serious manner. She had read about the brutal things that assassins did in books and had heard about them, so the idea that her champion was actually an assassin who killed people for cash appalled her. The thought of people murdering people for money is just so barbaric. I can't believe your people. These ninjas would be so cruel and inhuman. Melissa's description of ninjas was enough to infuriate Naruto. In order to eliminate individuals like Pain and Madara, Naruto had done everything in his power to alter the ninja world's structure so that there would be understanding, unity, peace, and trust. His late sensei Kakashi assured him that he would be able to outperform his own father, and his father Minato believed in him just as much as Jiraiya. He learned a lot from the compliments he received and from his experiences with ninjas from other villages as well as his own. He was aware that altering the current ninja system would not be simple or quick, but he was determined not to disappoint Jiraiya, his father, or those who have held a special place in his heart. He had his own way of being a ninja, and he was a ninja who never let go of his feelings, never used his skills for personal gain, and most importantly, used them to ensure that there would be peace and understanding in the world. It was offensive to have someone who knew very little about his world call ninjas barbaric and inhuman. Asuma, Jiraiya, Kakashi, and many others were among the ninjas who battled and sacrificed their lives to defeat the barbaric, vicious, and bloodthirsty ninjas in his world. It was extremely powerful for someone to openly disparage all ninjas. You've got some guts saying ninjas are barbarians, Melissa. I'm the only ninja you've met and you're already insulting us in general? But your people kill others for money. In case it escaped your attention, I said that the only time we resort to assassination is when there is no other option or if a war breaks out. Here's the difference between an assassin and a murderer for you to get the difference. An assassin kills for a mission as well as a purpose. A murderer just kills for the fun of it. Melissa responded, don't try to justify it, murder is still murder. And you think war isn't murder on a grand scale? You think armies moving about in battlefields or knights slaughtering each other in combat aren't committing murder already? I read the history books in the guild and I don't see why you can just insult others because of our occupation. Besides, your realms have assassins too, so what makes ninjas like myself barbarians? It's still wrong to take a human life. To a certain extent, Naruto had to accept that, but he had matured since his time as a genin in Konoha, encountered many people, and overcome many challenges in his ninja career. Nonetheless, he was prepared to support the actions of all the ninjas he knew to be good people, including Tsunade, Kakashi, Guy, Asuma, Lee, and all of their longtime friends, including Gaara when he vanquished the Suna ninja and his fellow Jinchuriki, who was now Suna's cage. And what about people who are corrupt and in positions of power, Melissa? What happens when they can be too powerful and too dangerous to face with an army and they can evade justice? That with their money and their power they can flaunt the law and do what they want. Tell me, how do you propose to deal with people like them? As Genie and Meryl watched, Melissa remained silent. They had never seen Naruto in this state before and assumed he was angry, but this was shocking to say the least. Although they still didn't think Naruto could ever be a warrior due to his reliance on fighting with his hands or this stuff he called taijutsu, they were both shocked to learn that he was an assassin or had been trained to be one. Naruto was far from finished speaking. His rage at Melissa's remarks would not simply subside. You think all ninjas are barbarians because we assassinate people? You know nothing about us. You have no idea about ninjas since you were never born into our culture and our traditions, and you have the audacity to insult and berate ninjas all because we do assassinate people as a last resort? I was under the impression that Miley taught many things to its priestesses in order to deal with their roles in the outside world. You know nothing about us and you just judge us right off the bat? I never knew that a priestess like you can be so dense as well as thick-headed. You disappoint me, Melissa. You think the real world is the same as is shown in storybooks? It's not. There are very harsh truths in the world, Melissa, and until you learn to open your mind to the reality of certain things as well as learn to understand before you comment on something, then I don't want to see your face at all. The ninja, mage, left in a very foul mood, and Naruto turned and stormed off, grabbing the tavern door and closing it with a loud smash. This left everyone in the tavern shocked and tense, as the silence was deafening. In Miley's temple, Miss Jenny, I must protest to this idea of having Naruto as my champion. Oh, and what is this time, Melissa? I just found out that Naruto is an assassin. He's a person who kills people for money. I can't have him recognized as my hero. I see a euro. I guess it was going to come out eventually. Melissa was taken aback by Jenny's easy acceptance of the news that Naruto was an assassin, and she couldn't help but question her order's head priestess about how she was able to handle this so easily. Miss Jenny, euro. On the other hand, I just had a discussion with Naruto, who came here earlier, and I can tell that he was very irate. What exactly did you say to him to make him that angry, Melissa? I said that assassinating people is wrong. It's cruel, inhuman, and barbaric. I see a euro, but let me ask you something, Melissa. Have you ever met other people like Naruto who are ninjas like him? Melissa paused, spoke, and grudgingly shook her head. No, I haven't a euro, yet you judged all people like him as barbarians? That is a very harsh description, Melissa. But he said they assassinate people for money. How can that not be barbaric? I admit that it is cruel to take another person's life for money, but have you seen Naruto take a person's life before, Melissa? Have you ever seen him kill in cold blood before, ever since you met him? No, a euro. So how can you say that he is and his people are barbarians? Melissa, Naruto told me a great deal about himself when I first met him, and like you, I was appalled by the fact that he was trained to take another person's life for money. But he told me that he has never taken an innocent life in cold blood in his entire life, and the people who he had fought with have committed very grievous crimes that merited them being dealt with. He told me of a corrupt businessman who nearly drove a country to its knees as well as breaking the spirit of the people who resided in it. He and his group were responsible for its recovery and eventual prosperity. Besides that, you must keep in mind that Naruto is not from around here, and grew up differently from you and I. Because of that, we have no right to quickly pass judgment on them. Naruto carries a great deal of burdens being a ninja, however he is different. Melissa waited for her superior in the Church of Miley to continue after giving Jenny a quick glance. Naruto would never let any harm come to those he cares deeply about and would risk his life to save those dear to him. If they are truly in danger of death, that is the only time Naruto will be ready and willing to take the life of his foe. That much was what Naruto has told me, and I can tell that he did not lie about that fact. Because he would not take a life without reason. He is different from a murderer, as he said to you. A murderer takes life without hesitation or reason. Naruto has reason to take a foe's life if he is forced to it. Besides, he has never taken the role of assassin when he left the guild, and considering his abilities before and his use of magic after leaving the guild, he would make a deadly assassin if he chose to do so. Melissa, I want to ask you this question. You would do anything to protect your friends and those under your charge, am I right? Of course I would, Miss Jenny. I am a priestess of Miley, and doing anything less is a mistake. But if you had no choice but to take a human life to save them, would you do it? This question caught Melissa off guard, and she looked down, unable to think of a suitable response for her superior. Jenny was aware of the seriousness of the situation and that Melissa would undoubtedly find it difficult to respond to that question. She also knew that Naruto had undoubtedly encountered that circumstance more frequently than any other member of the Order of Miley. Aside from herself in her own youth, she had also encountered this situation when she was a priestess. Just like Melissa, she glanced at Melissa, who was still having trouble answering the question she had put in front of her, and she waited a little longer for her to respond, which she eventually did. It's not easy for me to answer that question, Miss Jenny. I mean, if I have to fight monsters, I would fight without any problems, but the idea of taking a human life is a euro. Hard to fathom and grasp, but it is something that happens at times, and it will be hard to deal with if we are forced to take that path, Melissa. It is not something that is easy to do. Yet we must be ready for that path when it is the only option that we have to deal with. I had the same problems when I was your age, as well as being a novice priestess of Miley as well. Do you remember when I said to you when you found out that Naruto is your champion by the will of Miley? Melissa gave a nod. I have to know my champion more, that is what you said, Miss Jenny. Correct, Melissa. You have to take the time and effort to know just what sort of person Naruto really is in order for you to see just why he is chosen as your champion. As you already know, Miley chose him to be your champion, and Miley's ways are hard to fathom even by the highest of our order. Though we serve him, I have already apologized on your behalf to Naruto and he has accepted it for now, Euro, but he is still very angry at your words. In his chamber. Damn that woman. In an attempt to calm himself, Naruto was pacing back and forth and spinning a kunai in his hand through the loop on the handle's back. He continued to pace back and forth until he sat down and made the decision to reflect on what had transpired. The blonde mage ninja wished he didn't have this kind of issue, but he would have to face it now that he was involved. Since he had read enough books to understand that assassins were not exactly the most adored group in the world he lived in, Euro. Rather, they were viewed with disdain and open hatred and fear, Euro. He didn't really hold Melissa responsible for the response to the fact that he had received assassination training. He and the ninjas of his world, however, were not like them. Many of them were devoted to their villages, and even the missing nin had their own motivations for departing, with the exception of Itachi, who discovered the truth about the Uchiha clan massacre and the role that 3 Konoha elders had previously played in it. The majority of missing nin were criminals who had caused significant harm to the world, specifically the members of Akatsuki. Overall, good and evil ninjas did the same things. The only difference was that the good ninjas who killed in the name of their village did so because they knew it was the only thing they could do. On the other hand, the evil ninjas, like some he had personally met, did it for their own reasons and desires. He could never forgive Orochimaru for the extent of his crimes, which included kidnapping, torturing, murdering, experimenting, and manipulating numerous people, as well as the murder of the third Hokage, who was like a grandfather to him. He also corrupted and eventually twisted Sasuke into what he was, forcing him to defeat his former friend, and finally banishing the last of the Uchiha after Madara further twisted Sasuke for his own ends. Naruto had learned to accept that he would gladly kill those individuals in order to keep them from ever posing a threat to the world in which he lived. Nevertheless, he was aware that not all renegade ninjas were bad. Some, like Zabuza, who treated Haku like a tool, eventually came to regard the young man as his own son, and Gurren, who was once vicious and bloodthirsty, also came to treat Yukimaru like a son, undoubtedly assisting him in maturing and finding his own place. He was aware of other people who were similar to them, though they were obviously all unique in their motivations and personalities. As he sat on his bed, he reflected on everything that had happened in his life since he had defeated Madara and Sasuke to become a genin. The village had treated him much better than it had in the past, and many of the ninja there now regarded him as the pinnacle of what Konoha could be. Euro, a far cry from the days when he was still viewed as such. He was so absorbed that he did not notice that someone had entered his room and was at his door. Hey Naruto, Euro, you all right? Isla was staring at Naruto with a worried expression, so he turned to talk to his mage friend and relaxed. Yeah, Euro, I'm Finny, Euro. No, you're not, Naruto. I can tell you are in a foul mood. Does it have something to do with your teammates? Even when things were getting bad, Naruto always smiled, but this time he looked at Isla and snarled a little as he set down the kunai. He was able to calm down and express his thoughts. It's a long story, Euro. Why don't you tell me anyway? Well, Euro, I have to be honest with you, Isla. The techniques I used when I saved you and in my time here in the guild, those are techniques taught to me by Euro. By ninjas, and you are a ninja, right? This surprised Naruto a lot because, as far as he knew, he had never disclosed to Isla that he was a ninja. How did she find out about his actual profession and the skills that he and many others like him were trained in? How did you know about my being a ninja? Isla responded with a small smile. Master Carwest told me the day after you left the guild. He called me over and told me everything about you, Euro, though I have to admit that there were some things he didn't tell me about you. I was curious about those too, but he insisted that I don't try and find out, as those are secrets that are best left unlearned. Human. Naruto looked at Isla as he asked her the question he knew was very important to him, not realizing that she had actually been aware of his ninja status. It doesn't bother you that I'm trained to be an assassin? Isla answered, shaking her head. It doesn't bother me, but I have my reasons. You certainly are too nice and gentle as a young man to take life without reason, and you have always stood up for me when you dealt with Garrett and Hayden, and call it women's intuition or just plain trust. But you are no murderer in my eyes, so why should I be bothered about you being ninja? This made Naruto smile a little, and that smile grew into a big smile as he instinctively embraced Isla. Isla was thrilled, and she returned the hug, never expecting such a response from her longtime friend. but it made her heart glad that she could easily lift his spirits. This was also the first time she had been able to get this close to him, and she was thrilled to feel his well-defined and toned body. Though Isla wasn't Sakura, who occasionally responded to his affections with a gentle tap on the head using her strength, Naruto was able to recover and realized that he was hugging her. Knowing that he was getting too close, he started to gently separate from the svelte and well-built red-haired female mage. He could have locked the door and carried out the action, but he was still very loyal to Sakura and Hinata, and he didn't want to let his hormones control him. Besides, there was a chance that someone from the guild might enter and use an unlocking spell to remove the lock on his door, and the last thing he wanted was to find himself in a highly precarious situation with Isla. Thanks a great deal for the support, Isla. Not a problem, Naruto, but I want to ask something. Are you still intent on going to the Tarsius forest? Yeah, I don't have a choice at all if I need a wand, and I guess that no matter what, I will have to be accompanied by Melissa and the group. I had a feeling that was the case, so tell me what happened between you and her that got you so worked up. Isla was not pleased with Melissa's response when Naruto told her everything. While she acknowledged that assassins were not the most well-liked people in their society, she felt that it went a bit too far to declare that Naruto's people were barbarians. As an academic, she had been able to recognize that other nations had different perspectives, and it was deemed narrow-minded to make such a snap judgment about a whole people. I can't believe she said that about your people, Naruto. That's just plain cruel, Euro. I know, but to be honest with you, there have been ninjas in my homeland who were really barbaric, so I can't really fault Melissa's reaction to it. But there are just as many good ninjas who gave their lives to stop ninjas like them, and it made me angry since she thought all ninjas were barbarians, since it felt like she was insulting even those ninjas who made a very good difference in the land I was born in. After giving a nod, Isla made the bold decision to ask a very private question. Naruto, Euro, I know I never asked this before, but if you're a ninja, then were your parents ninja too? Naruto nodded, although he was proud to have learned more about his mother and that his father was the fourth Hokage and Konoha's Yellow Flash. He also knew that he had never been told his parentage because he knew that if his father Minato's former enemies ever found out that he was Minato's son, they would pursue him. He made the decision to keep his parentage a secret in observance of that, as well as his reconciliation with his father and his discovery of his family. He would never risk disclosing it, not even to Sakura, Hinata, and consequently, Isla. My father and mother were both ninja, but they were heroes for fighting in very bloody wars, but they Euro died when I was still a baby, so I never really knew them. Isla responded after giving her friend a sympathetic and melancholy glance. But I think that they would be proud of you. Thanks, now I think I need to get some rest, Isla. I need to relax a bit more before I meet Melissa and the others again before I head off to the Tarsius forest, and thanks for you and your father for getting supplies ready. Isla smiled and answered, not a problem, Naruto. The supplies are already waiting for you in one of the shops in the market district whose owner is a friend of my father. Just drop by there and tell them your name and they'll give you the supplies I saved for the trip. Naruto smiled before falling asleep. He then made the decision to take action first because he wanted to observe how things would develop between him, Melissa, Genie, and Meryl, and see if he could do something to reduce their tension and make working with them a little easier. After 3 days at Genie's house. While Genie was training in front of her house, she thought about accompanying Naruto to the Tarsius forest. She could say no because she was not a priestess of Meili, but she could also say no because Melissa was her friend and they had gone on too many adventures together, and Meryl was a good friend in her own right. Speaking of whom, Genie set aside her sword and the supplies they still had from the last adventure, Euro, or rather, the wasteful one they had with Naruto, Euro. As they sat down and Genie spoke to Melissa, who was still lost in thought, the young thief arrived as well. How did it go with head priestess Jenny? Melissa answered with a sigh. Not so good. She said that I have to continue working with Naruto and also try to see him for who he really is. Meryl answered. I still think that he's a loudmouth, Melissa, but at least he's got the guts to stand up for himself. He's certainly not like any mage I know of, and if he is really serious about being this ninja, this could be fun to see. I'd like to see if he can really back up his words. Melissa nodded, but she remained highly dissatisfied that her champion had been trained as an assassin. Since she was a young child, she had dreamed of having a brave, strong, attractive, and gallant knight as her champion, Euro, the embodiment of her ideal champion. Instead, she received a perverted, irascible, and extremely strange man who was a mage and also trained as an assassin. She was still quite uncomfortable and concerned about her reputation and personal safety because it was still very uncommon for a priestess of Meili to have an assassin as a champion. Nevertheless, Melissa made the decision to at least make an effort to comprehend Naruto better, she had to acknowledge that Miley must have had a motive for selecting Naruto as her champion. Speaking of which, a certain blonde ninja was passing by with a slightly larger pouch on his back. Isla had given him the bag, a magical pouch that could hold a lot of stuff, and he used it to carry a lot of his kunai and shuriken, along with several more spare weapons and storage scrolls, some extra clothes, and bandages. He also carried the remnants of his old wand, which he had decided would be useful in the near future. If there was one thing he had learned well, it was to never throw away anything that could still be useful, even if it was no longer useful for channeling magical energy. He crossed his arms, spoke to the priestess, and gave Melissa a stern look as he arrived. I had a chat with head priestess Jenny about your actions last time and she apologized for you, Melissa, so just for now, I'm burying my anger towards your words, but don't think for a minute that I have forgotten what you said about my people. I just said what I felt and knew was right, Naruto. That's your perception then, so let's leave it at that. If any of you have anything to do still, then get it done soon. We leave soon enough. Then Genie answered, you're not in charge of us, Naruto. No, I'm not, but since I have to go and Melissa is required by her order and by Miley to come with me, so at this moment, that somewhat puts me in the lead at this time. Meryl answered with a snort. Don't expect us to trust you when you lead the way, Naruto. With a shrug, Naruto answered, I don't, so let's quit talking and get moving, shall we? I already got the supplies I need as well as the supplies that were left over for the trip for you three, so the sooner we get going then even entire better for all involved. In one of the untamed regions before the Tarsui's forest, a small but well-armed band of demon-like creatures, which were identified as goblins and trolls, met the group as they entered the village. Naruto and the others immediately set out to battle them. He had no idea why these creatures were so far from their destination, but he didn't intend to worry about it for very long. He removed his kunai, closed the distance with the first demon, and swiftly dodged the blows, landing a forceful kick to the side of the head before leaping over the creature and landing on the ground just as another demon rose his weapons to block the attack before engaging in combat using his taijutsu training. To balance the monsters, Genie used her sword, Meryl used her daggers and throwing knives, and Melissa used her warhammer. The group performed well enough on their own during the brief battle, and Melissa watched Naruto use both his underhanded fighting techniques and his taijutsu skills. Jenny had mentioned that she was trying to learn more about Naruto, but what was there to learn about him anyway? She still didn't like that he was her champion because of his attitudes, his fighting style, his ungentlemanly tactics, and the fact that he was an assassin. He didn't appear to have any other secrets that she would be particularly interested in, but she remembered that Miley must have had a reason for having him as her champion, and she didn't want to offend him. Naruto and the others continued on as the group cleaned up the area, but only for a short while longer as they all paused to rest at a nearby clearing. Meryl spoke with a sigh. Are we coming closer to the forest? Naruto answered, shaking his head.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.